Clara Whitmore threw the marriage contract on the table and said, "I won't sign a lie." Nathan Cole didn't flinch. "Then don't. But you'll be out on the road by dark, and we both know what's waiting for you there. Say it plainly. Why me?" He picked up the pen and held it out. "Because I need a wife." It was the first lie he'd ever told her. It would not be the last. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, so I can see just how far this story has traveled. 3 days before she signed her name to a man she barely knew, Clara Whitmore stood in her father's kitchen and counted what was left of her life. It didn't take long. A tin of coffee, a cracked sugar bowl with $11.40 in it, her mother's wedding ring, which the bank had already asked about twice, and a stack of papers on the table, each one a polite little sentence that ended with the same word owed. $932, she said out loud, because saying it made it real, and she had learned that pretending something wasn't real only gave it more time to grow. She'd said the number 3 times that morning. It hadn't gotten smaller. Her father had been dead 11 days. He'd been a good man in every way except the ones that kept a farm. He signed things he didn't read. He shook hands with men who counted on that. And when the fever took him in the spring, he took the last of the harvest money with him, spent, borrowed against, and gone. The banker had come on a Tuesday. He'd taken off his hat at the door, which Clara appreciated, and then he'd taken everything else, which she did not. "Miss Whitmore," he'd said, "I'm not a cruel man. I know it. But I'm not a rich one either. I know that too. You have until the end of the month." She'd walked him to the door. She'd thanked him. She'd waited until his wagon was over the hill before she sat down on the step and put her face in her hands. And even then she didn't cry, because crying was a thing you did when someone was coming to help. Nobody was coming. By the 8th day, she'd been to every door in the valley. She was 26 years old, unmarried, and had never in her life asked a living soul for anything. That was the part that broke her, not the money. The asking. The Hollisters had known her since she was a child. Mrs. Hollister put a hand on her arm at the door and said, "Oh, Clara, you know Ed and I would if we could." And Clara said, "Of course," and smiled and walked back down the road, knowing perfectly well that the Hollisters had just put in a new stove. The Marsdens didn't answer at all, though she saw the curtain move. Reverend Pike offered to pray with her. "I'd be grateful," Clara said, and meant it, and knelt with him on the church floor for 11 minutes, and when she rose, she was still $932 in debt. "The Lord provides," the Reverend said. "He's been busy," said Clara. The Reverend looked at her sharply. "Forgive me," she said. "I haven't slept." On the 9th day, Bess Tanner came out to the farm with a pie and a proposition. Bess ran the boarding house in town and knew everything about everyone, which she considered a public service rather than a sin. She set the pie down, looked around the emptying kitchen, and got straight to it. "You've got 2 roads, honey. You want me to say them out loud, or you want to keep pretending there's 3? Say them. 1. You go east to your aunt in Missouri. My aunt hasn't written since I was 9. 2. Bess sat. You marry. Clara laughed. It came out wrong, too high, too fast. Who exactly Delmer Kane? He's 58, and he chews with his mouth open. He's got 400 acres. He's got 400 acres and 3 dead wives, Bess. That's just talk. It's arithmetic. Bess spread her hands. All right. Then there's the other one. Clara went still. Don't. I'm going to. Bess. Nathan Cole. The name landed in the kitchen like a dropped plate. Clara turned to the window so Bess couldn't see her face. He doesn't speak to people. He speaks. He came to town twice last winter. Twice. He bought nails and left. He's got the biggest spread in the valley, and no wife, and no children, and no soul that anybody can find, Bess said. And he's not 58, and he's never buried anybody but the one. The one, Clara turned. What one? Bess's mouth closed. Bess. What one? Ask him yourself, Bess said, and stood up and brushed her skirt like the conversation had gotten dust on it. Eat the pie. You're getting thin, and thin doesn't help a girl negotiate. Clara didn't sleep that night either. She sat at the table with the lamp burning down to nothing, and she thought about the word survive. She'd always hated it. It was a word for animals, for weather. She'd wanted a life, she'd had plans, once actual plans before her mother died, and the plans quietly turned into chores. She'd wanted to keep books for a proper company. She was better with numbers than any man she'd ever met, and she knew it, and knowing it, and never once being allowed to use it, had put a small hard stone in her chest that she carried everywhere. Now, here she was, 26, educated, clever, sitting in a house that wasn't hers, doing arithmetic that always came out the same. She thought, if I go to that man's door, I am the thing they'll say I am. And then she thought, and if I don't, I'm the thing they'll bury. She blew out the lamp at 4 in the morning. At 6, she put on her good dress. The strange part, the part she'd think about for years afterward lying awake beside a sleeping man in a house she'd learned to love, was that she almost didn't go. She got to the fork in the road, and she stopped. Left was the Cole Ranch. Right was town, and the stage and Missouri, and an aunt who hadn't written in 17 years. She stood there so long that a hawk landed on the fence post and looked at her and left again. Later Nathan would tell her he'd been watching from the ridge, that he'd seen her stop, that he'd sat on his horse for 11 minutes with his hands shaking on the reins, and that in those 11 minutes he'd made and unmade 7 different promises to God. But that was later. She went left. She'd expected a foreman, a hired man, somebody to announce her. There was nobody. The place was enormous and silent and running like a clock with no clockmaker in sight. She knocked. The door opened so fast she took a step back. Nathan Cole filled the doorway. He was younger than she'd expected, 34, 35, and there was gray already in the hair at his temple, and his eyes went over her once, and then somewhere past her shoulder, like looking straight at her, cost him something. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "You know my name." "I know everybody's name." That wasn't true, and some part of her registered it as not true, and filed it the way she filed a column that didn't add. "May I come in?" He didn't move. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I've walked 6 miles. If you're going to say no, say it now, and I'll walk the 6 back." He stepped aside. She sat. He didn't. He stood by the window with his arms crossed like a man guarding a door in a burning building, and Clara looked at the room and thought, nobody lives here. There was no clutter, no coat thrown down, no cup left half drunk. Everything was clean and correct and dead. "Say your piece," he said. So she did. She'd rehearsed it on the road. She got through the first sentence before her voice betrayed her, and she stopped and started again, and this time she got it all out. "My father died. He left debts. The bank takes the farm at the end of the month. I've been to every house in this valley, and every one of them shut the door polite, and I have $11.40, and I am not going to Missouri to be somebody's unpaid housemaid until I die." Nathan said nothing. "I'm told you have no wife." Nothing. "I'm told you need someone to run this place. Accounts, records, household." Nothing. Clara's hands were shaking. She put them in her lap. "Mr. Cole, I am asking you to marry me." The clock on the mantel ticked 11 times. She counted. She always counted. Then Nathan Cole said in a voice with nothing at all in it, "No." She'd been ready for humiliation. She'd been ready for laughter, for pity, for a lecture. She hadn't been ready for no. "No," she repeated. "That's right." "May I ask why?" "You may not." Something in her snapped clean through. She stood up so fast the chair scraped. "Then you'll hear it anyway," she said. "You've got 200 head of cattle you can't count properly because you keep your books like a drunk keeps a diary." Yes, I looked at the ledger on the shelf when I came in, and I'm not sorry. You're paying a feed bill twice a season, and you don't know it. Your tally book's 4 months behind. You've got a man somewhere skimming, and you're too proud or too tired to find out. Nathan had turned. All the way for the first time. You went through my books. I looked at one page. One page Mr. Cole and I could tell you're bleeding. Get out. Gladly. She got her shawl. Her whole body was one hot, humiliated wire. I'll say one more thing, and then you can have your quiet back. I didn't come here to be saved. I came here to work. If you'd hired me as a man, I'd have been the best you ever had. But I'm not a man, so the only job you'll give me is wife, and you won't even give me that. She was at the door. Miss Whitmore. She didn't turn. How much, he said. What? The debt. How much? $932. Silence. And 40 cents, she said. The 40 cents matters. When you've got nothing, the 40 cents is the whole world. She heard him breathe out a long, unsteady sound, like a man setting down something he'd been carrying up a hill. Sit down, Nathan Cole said. Please. Did. He paced. That surprised her. She'd thought he was a man who never moved unless paid to. If I say yes, he said, you need to understand what it is. I understand exactly what it is. You don't. Mr. Cole, it's a contract. He turned. Not a courtship. There's no affection in it. There's no expectation of it. You'd have your own room. You'd have the accounts if you want them. You'd have my name and whatever protection it buys you, which in this valley is more than you think. And that's all. That's the whole of it. Clara looked at him a long moment. You've thought about this, she said slowly. You've thought about this before today. He went very still. Every man in this valley has thought about marrying, he said. That's not what I asked. Do you want the offer or not? And there it was again, the column that didn't add. She felt it. She felt it the way you feel a step missing in the dark. He'd said, your own room too fast. He'd said, the accounts if you want them. Like a man who already knew she'd want them. She let it go. She was too tired, and she was too close, and she wanted it too badly. I want it, she said. Then hear the rest. He crossed his arms. They'll talk about you. Let them. You say that now. Mr. Cole, they've been talking about me for 11 days. They talked about me at my father's grave. Mrs. Hollister asked me at the graveside whether I'd be selling the piano. Something moved across his face. It was there and gone. Was there a piano? He asked. There was a piano, Clara said. There isn't now. Nathan looked at the floor. Fine, he said. 2 more things. Say them. 1. If you ever want out, you say the word and you're out, and you keep the name, and I'll settle money on you and I won't ask a question. Clara blinked. That's not a condition. That's a gift. It's a condition. Take it as a condition. And the second. Nathan Cole hesitated. And she would remember that hesitation later. Remember it in the middle of the night, in a room she wasn't supposed to enter, with a letter in her hand that made the whole world turn over. There's a room at the back of the house, he said. The door's locked. It stays locked. That's not negotiable, and I won't explain it. Not now, not in a year, not ever. Clara's throat went dry. What's in it? That's the condition, Miss Whitmore. His voice didn't rise. It went lower, which was worse. You don't ask. She should have walked. Later, everyone would say she should have walked. Agreed, Clara said. He wrote it out himself at the table in a small, tight hand. She read every word twice, because she read everything twice, because her father hadn't, and that was why she was here. And when she got to the 4th clause, she stopped. This is wrong. It's what we said. It says the debt is settled in full and without expectation of repayment or service. She looked up. Without service, Mr. Cole, the service is the entire point. I run the ranch, you pay the debt. That's the trade. That's not the trade. Then what is? Nathan set the pen down. The trade, he said, is that you don't go to Missouri. Clara stared at him. That's not a trade, she said quietly. That's a... Sign it, Miss Whitmore. That's charity, and I told you I won't take... Sign it. And it was the first time she ever heard him raise his voice, and there was something underneath it that she couldn't name. Not anger. Something closer to fear. She threw the contract on the table. I won't sign a lie. Then don't. But you'll be out on the road by dark, and we both know what's waiting for you there. Say it plainly. Why me? He picked up the pen and held it out. Because I need a wife. Clara took the pen. Her hand hovered. You're a terrible liar, she said. I've had no practice, said Nathan Cole. She signed. They married on a Thursday. It took 9 minutes. She counted. Reverend Pike did it, and he did it fast, and he did it with the particular brisk distaste of a man who wants to be able to say later that he didn't approve. There were 4 witnesses. Bess Tanner, who cried, which nobody expected, including Bess. Old Mac Rowe, Nathan's foreman, who stood at the back with his hat in his hands and never once looked up. The Reverend's wife, who looked at Clara the entire time the way you look at a stain. And a boy of about 15 named Toby Lundgren, who worked at the livery and had been sent to hold the horses and had wandered in out of curiosity. Clara wore her mother's dress taken in. There were no flowers. Do you, Clara Ann Whitmore, take this man? I do. Do you, Nathan Cole? And Nathan Cole stopped. The pause went on 1 second. 2. 3. Clara's stomach dropped straight through the church floor because she genuinely thought he's going to leave me standing here. Then he said, I do, and his voice cracked, it cracked like a boy's, and Reverend Pike looked up in surprise, and Bess Tanner made a small sound in the second pew, and Clara turned her head and looked at her husband, and saw for 1/2 of 1 second, before he got the door shut again, a man about to weep. Well, she thought with a lurch of pure ice. He didn't want this either. We've both made a mistake. She would be wrong about that for the next 11 weeks. Outside on the church steps, Mrs. Pike said it not quietly and not by accident. $900. That's what a Whitmore goes for. Clara stopped walking. She felt Nathan's hand come up, not touching her, hovering an inch from her back, and she stepped away from it. She turned around. Mrs. Pike, she said pleasantly, how much is your husband's church in arrears? The woman's mouth opened. Because I keep books. Clara went on. And I kept your husband's 3 summers ago when his eyes went bad, and I remember the figure. Would you like me to say it here on the steps in front of everyone? Clara Whitmore. Cole, said Clara. It's Cole now. You said so yourself. $900 worth. And she walked to the wagon and climbed up by herself without help and sat with her spine straight as a fence rail and did not permit her face to move. Nathan got up beside her. He picked up the reins. He didn't say anything for a mile. Then, looking dead ahead, he said, $240. What? The church, in arrears. You remember the figure. Clara turned to look at him. You knew that Mac's cousin sits on the board. A pause. You were bluffing. I was not bluffing. I was lying. There's a difference, and it's mostly courage. And Nathan Cole laughed. It was the shortest laugh in the history of laughing. 1 breath out the nose gone. But Clara heard it, and something in her chest did a thing she did not authorize. Don't, she told herself. Don't you dare. This is a contract. The house was worse than the town, not the building. The building was fine, better than fine. It was the finest house she'd ever set foot in. It was the silence. On that first night, he showed her to a room at the top of the stairs and said, This is yours. The key's in the door. It locks from the inside. And Clara said, Do I need it to? And Nathan said no, but it should be there anyway. And went downstairs, and she heard the front door open and close, and from the window she watched him walk out to the barn. He slept in the barn. He slept in the barn for 6 weeks. She didn't find that out for 4 of them, because she never heard him come in, because he was up before she was, and gone after she'd gone to bed, and the only proof he existed at all was that the wood box by the stove was always full, and she never once filled it. On the 5th day, she said at breakfast to his back, "Mr. Cole?" "Nathan." "Nathan, do you intend to speak to me at any point in this marriage?" He stopped with his hand on the door. "About what?" "Anything. The weather, the cattle. Whether you'd prefer I stop existing in the kitchen between 6 and 7, so you can have it to yourself, which I've noticed you'd prefer." "I hadn't noticed you noticed." "Nathan, I notice everything. It's the only reason I'm alive." He stood there. She watched his shoulders. "The books are in the second drawer of the desk," he said. "All of them, not just the one you looked at." And he left. Clara sat down slowly, because that wasn't nothing. That was, in fact, a man handing over his entire life to a woman he'd known for 5 days and doing it sideways out the door, so he wouldn't have to watch her take it. Yink. She opened the second drawer that afternoon, and it took her 9 hours to stop. There were 11 ledgers. Some of them went back 15 years in a hand that wasn't Nathan's, his father's, she guessed, because the writing got shakier and then stopped in 1879, and after that it was Nathan's. And Nathan's was terrible. Not dishonest, exhausted. You could read the grief in it. The entries got shorter and shorter through 1880 and 1881 until whole months were just numbers with no note at all. A man doing the minimum to keep a thing alive. And then in 1882, it picked up again barely and limped along like that ever since. Something happened to this man in 1880. She wrote it down on a slip of paper. 1880. And then she looked at the slip and felt like a thief and burned it in the stove. Then she went back to work. By midnight, she had it. She had it in 3 columns, and she checked it twice, and then she checked it a 3rd time because the 3rd time was for her father. She waited up. He came in at 1:30 and found her at the table with a lamp and every ledger open. "You're awake. Sit down." "Clara." "Nathan Cole, sit down." He sat. She turned the book around. "Somebody," she said, "is stealing from you. And they've been doing it for 4 years, and they're good at it. And I want you to look at me while I say the rest." He looked at her, and Clara saw his face change not at the theft. He didn't care about the theft. His face changed because she'd said his whole name and told him to sit down, and he'd done it. And there was something in his eyes that she couldn't read at all, something enormous and grateful and terrified. "How much?" he said. $2,160. She let it sit. "Give or take." Nathan didn't move. "That's 2 years' profit," he said. "That's 2 years' profit." "You found that in 1 day." "I found that in 9 hours." She closed the book. "And Nathan, I could have found it in 3 if your handwriting were legible." He put his hands over his face. She waited, and then Nathan Cole said from behind his hands, in a voice she'd never heard from him, and would only hear a handful of times in her whole life, "I knew." Clara's blood stopped. "What?" "I knew somebody was taking it." He lowered his hands. His eyes were red. 3 years I've known. I couldn't make myself look. Every time I opened that drawer, I'd think about my father, and I'd shut it again. Nathan, you want to know why I said yes to you?" He laughed, and it was awful. "Not the reason I gave. The real one." Clara couldn't breathe. "Yes," she said. And Nathan opened his mouth, and Mac Rowe knocked on the door. It was a fire in the west barn, small, handled by Dawn. But by dawn the moment was gone, and Nathan was. Nathan again, hat on jaw. Set door closed. And when Clara said, "You were going to tell me something," he said, "It was nothing. I was tired," and walked out. Clara stood in the kitchen and said out loud to nobody, "You're a terrible liar." Duh. She found the fence 3 days later. She'd mentioned it exactly once in passing, 6 days before the rails down in the south lot. One of the calves could walk right through, and she'd said it to the room, not to him, and he'd made no sign of hearing. It was fixed. New rail, new nails. She asked Mac about it. Who fixed the south fence? Old Mac Rowe went the color of a beet. Couldn't say, ma'am. Mac? Couldn't say. Mac Rowe, you are 61 years old and you cannot lie to save your soul. Who fixed the fence? Mac looked at the sky. Mac looked at his boots. He was out there till 2 in the morning, Mac said. With a lantern. In the rain. And then because he'd started and couldn't stop, ma'am, he does it every time. You say a thing once and he does it and he don't never tell you. The boots. He stopped so fast his teeth clicked. Clara's heart went sideways. What boots? Nothing, ma'am. What boots, Mac? Her boots. Her mother's old boots, the ones with the heel gone soft and the seam split, which she'd left by the door 2 weeks ago, and found sitting there the next morning resoled, restitched, oiled better than new, and she'd assumed it was the cobbler in town. She'd assumed Nathan had sent them out. She'd assumed. He did it himself, she whispered. Mac was already walking away. Mac. Mac turned around. And the old man's face was tight and strange, and he said something that Clara Cole would carry in her chest for the rest of her natural life. Ma'am, I've been with that man 22 years, since he was a boy, and I want you to hear this from somebody, since he'll never say it. He swallowed. I ain't seen him whistle since before you was old enough to marry. He whistled Tuesday, in the barn. He didn't even know he was doing it. And then he did walk away fast, and Clara stood in the yard holding a fence post and could not for the life of her figure out why her eyes had gone hot. The town got worse before it got better, which is to say, it never got better. She heard the first one at the dry goods store from behind a stack of flour sacks in a voice that made no effort at all to be quiet. Walked right up to his door and asked, Can you imagine? Not a word of shame in her. Well, $900? 940 cents, I heard. Clara paid for her flour. She thanked the clerk. She walked out with her chin up and got 20 yards down the boardwalk before her hands started shaking so hard she had to set the sack on a barrel. Toby Lundgren, the livery boy, was suddenly beside her. Mrs. Cole, you want me to carry that? I'm fine, Toby. You ain't, though, said Toby, who was 15 and had not yet learned to lie either. He picked up the flour. Don't listen to them. My ma says Mr. Cole's the only man in this county ever paid a bill early. Clara laughed shakily. Your mother has low standards for a compliment. My ma says he paid ours when Pa died and told her not to tell nobody. Toby shrugged. So? Clara stopped walking. He what? Ma'am, I gotta get back. Toby. But the boy was gone, and Clara Cole stood in the middle of the street in a town that hated her, with a fact in her hands that didn't fit anywhere. She had a place to put it. That was the 11th week. That was when she started keeping her own ledger, a private one, in the back of her diary, and she titled it, half as a joke, Things That Don't Add. The fence. The boots. The blankets by the fire every cold night before I come down always. The tea. I mentioned the tea once. 6 weeks ago. He drinks coffee. The book on my nightstand. I never bought that book. Mrs. Lundgren's bill. You may not ask why. 1880. The locked room. And at the bottom, in smaller writing, the entry she couldn't make herself cross out. He knew my name before I said it. The thing that broke it open was Delmer Kane. He came out in October, the 58-year-old, with the 400 acres and the arithmetic, and he came out to talk cattle, and he stayed to talk about Clara. She heard it through the kitchen wall. She wasn't listening on purpose. She'd like the record to show that. No offense, meant Cole. Just curious how a man arranges a thing like that. Arranges what? Come on now. Girl walks in with nothing and walks out with your name. There's a word for it. And Clara stood with her hand flat against the wall and waited for her husband to defend her. And he didn't. and she felt something inside her simply put its coat on and start toward the door. Then Kane said, "Course I'd have took her myself. She'd have said yes too if you hadn't got there first. Desperate's desperate." And Nathan Cole said very quietly, "Get off my land. Now hold on. You've got 100 yards to the gate. I'd use them." "Cole, I'm buying 200 head off you in the spring." "You're buying nothing off me in the spring, or any spring. Get off my land, and if you say her name again in this county, Delmer, look at me. If you say her name once more where I can hear it, we're going to have a conversation you will not enjoy." The front door. Boots. A horse leaving fast. Clara stood in the kitchen with her hand over her mouth. She should have been glad. She was glad. But there was a splinter in it. A cold little splinter, and it went in deep and stayed. He didn't say it wasn't true. He said, "Don't say it out loud." So she confronted him that night. She'd never confronted anyone in her life. It turned out she was good at it. "Why did you marry me? Clara." "Don't." She had both hands on the table. "Don't Clara me and walk out. You've walked out of every conversation we've had since July, and I've let you, and I'm done letting you. Why did you marry me?" "I told you. You told me you needed a wife. You don't need a wife. You need a foreman, and you had one, and he's 61 and he'd die for you." Her voice was climbing and she couldn't stop it. "You could have hired a bookkeeper for $40 a year. You paid $932. That's not... You could have had any woman in that town. Any one of them. Alice Marsden's father would have thrown her at you gift-wrapped, and you've never so much as tipped your hat." Clara. "So why me?" She was almost shouting now. "Why the poorest woman in this valley? Why the one everybody's laughing at? Why the charity case? Nathan. Why me? What is wrong with me that made you—" "There's nothing wrong with you." The room rang. He'd shouted. He'd come up off the chair and he'd shouted it with everything he had. And now he was standing there breathing like a man who'd run a mile. And Clara had both hands over her mouth, and neither of them moved for a very long time. "There is nothing wrong with you," Nathan Cole said again, wrecked. "There has never been one single thing wrong with you. Not one, not ever." Clara whispered, "You don't know me." And her husband looked at her, and something went across his face, grief and terror, and 8 years of held breath, and he said, "Don't I?" Then he turned and walked out, and did not come back that night. Clara sat down on the kitchen floor. Not in the chair. The floor. She sat there until the lamp went out. "Don't I?" 2 words, and the entire architecture of the last 11 weeks came down like a barn in a wind. She went through it. She was good at going through it. That was the whole of her. That was the only gift she'd ever been given. "Clara, you notice everything." He knew her name at the door. He knew about the piano. He'd asked, was there a piano, and his face had done something, and she'd thought it was pity. And it wasn't pity. It was recognition because he already knew about the piano. He was only asking to find out whether she'd tell him. He'd known she'd want the accounts. "Your own room." "Your own room," said before she asked. Said like a man who'd rehearsed it. Said like a man who'd rehearsed the whole conversation over and over for so long that when it finally came, he'd said his lines a half-second too early. "The tea. The book. The boots. I want you to choose it." He'd almost said that night with the ledgers before the fire. She'd heard the shape of it under the words. "Every man in this valley has thought about marrying. That's not what I asked. Do you want the offer or not?" "Clara?" Cole put her hands flat on the kitchen floor, and the arithmetic came out the way arithmetic always did for her, whether she wanted it to or not, whether it ruined her or not, and it came out to a number that made her whole body go cold. "He didn't marry me because I came to his door. He said yes in 9 minutes because he'd been answering that question for years." She got up. She got up off that floor, and she walked down the dark hall to the back of the house, and she stood in front of a door that was locked, that had always been locked, that she had sworn signed her name, swore never to ask about. She put her hand on it. She could hear her own heart. Nathan, she said to the door out loud alone, at 4 in the morning. What did you do? And on the other side of it, in a wooden box, she wouldn't open for another 9 days. 8 years of letters sat in the dark with her name on every single one. He came back at noon the next day, and neither of them mentioned it, which was its own kind of conversation. Clara had the ledgers spread across the whole table when he walked in, and she didn't look up, and Nathan hung his hat on the peg and stood there like a man waiting to be sentenced. "Sit down," she said. "Clara, I'm not going to ask you again." She turned a page. "Not about that, not today. I've got something bigger." He sat. She slid a single sheet across to him, 1 column, 9 entries. "Whoever's stealing from you," Clara said, "isn't a hand, it isn't a drover, and it isn't a cook, and it isn't anybody who's ever swung a rope in his life." "How do you know that?" "Because a hand steals cattle. A hand steals a saddle or $40 out of the box, and then he's gone by Christmas, and you notice." She tapped the sheet. "This person has never touched a cow. This person steals arithmetic." Nathan looked at the paper. "I don't." "Look at the feed bill. 2nd week of April, $311. "That's right." "It's not right, and here's how I know. You bought feed in April 4 years running, same supplier, same tonnage near enough. And every single April there's a second bill 10 days later for a smaller amount from the same supplier in a different hand." She looked up. "Nathan, your supplier died in 1883. The clock ticked." "What?" "Emmett Sharp. Sharp and Son out of Cheyenne. He died 3 years ago. His son sold the company to a Denver outfit, and they changed the letterhead, and they've been billing you on the new letterhead ever since, which you can see if you look because it's right here." She laid 2 invoices side by side. "And here's the other one. Same April, old letterhead, from a dead man." Nathan didn't move. "Somebody," Clara said, "has a drawer full of Emmett Sharp's old paper, and every spring he takes out a sheet and writes a bill from a corpse and puts it in your pile. And you pay it. Because you pay everything, Nathan, that's your whole system. You pay it and you shut the drawer." "Jesus," Nathan said. 240 last April, 280 the April before. He's getting braver." She sat back. "He'll do it again in 9 months. And I'll be waiting for him, and I'll have him by the throat, and I want you to promise me something." "What?" "When I tell you who it is," Clara said, "you don't get to shut the drawer." Nathan Cole looked at his wife across a table full of his own failures, and Clara watched him decide something. "Who is it?" he said. "I don't know yet." "You do, I suspect. There's a difference, and it's mostly evidence." "Clara?" "No." She closed the ledger. "Because if I say a name and I'm wrong, you'll never trust my numbers again, and my numbers are the only thing I own. Give me a month." "Give you a month," he repeated. "That's what I said." And Nathan Cole did the thing that she would think about later. When everything came apart, he reached across the table and he pushed the whole stack of ledgers toward her. 15 years of his family's life, and he said, "Take a year." Then he got up and went out, and she heard him whistling in the yard, and he stopped himself. 2 bars in the way a man catches himself talking in church. She had the name in 11 days. It took her that long because she had to be sure, and it took her that long because the answer was ugly, and it took her that long because every time the arithmetic pointed the same direction, she made it start over from the beginning to see if it would change its mind. It never changed its mind. She waited until Nathan was in the north pasture, and she saddled the gray mare herself badly and rode into town, and she went to the county recorder's office and paid 40 cents she could not spare and asked to see the incorporation papers for the Cole Ranch. The clerk was a small nervous man named Pell. "Ma'am, that's a private—" "They're public. That's what recorded means. It's the entire purpose of your job, Mr. Pell, and I'd hate to think you've been doing something else all these years." She got the papers. She read them standing up at the counter, and she got 4 lines down and had to put a hand on the wood. "Mr. Pell." "Ma'am." "Who is Silas Cole?" Pell went the color of paste. "I couldn't." "You could. You're going to." "Ma'am, please." "Mr. Pell," Clara leaned in. I am the wife of the largest landowner in this county, and I have $11.40 to my name, which means I have nothing to lose, and I want you to sit with that for a moment before you tell me you couldn't say. Pell said. Silas Cole was Nathan's cousin. Silas Cole had held a 9% interest in the ranch since 1878, put in by Nathan's father as a kindness to his dead sister's boy. Silas Cole lived in Cheyenne. Silas Cole had, according to Pell, who had a memory like a ledger himself, come out to the valley exactly twice a year for 11 years and had signed for the mail, and had once told Pell right there at that counter, laughing, that his cousin Nathan couldn't add 2 and 2 if you gave him both numbers. When does he come? Clara said. April. Pell swallowed. And October. Clara went very still. Mr. Pell, she said, what month is it? He didn't get to answer. She was already at the door. She rode back so fast she nearly put the mare in a badger hole, and she came into the yard at a gallop with her hair down and her hat gone somewhere in the sage, and Mac Rowe came out of the barn with a bucket in each hand and dropped both of them. Ma'am. Mac, has a man named Silas been here? The old man's face did something she'd never seen it do. Ma'am, you want to go inside? Is he here? He come this morning, Mac said. Silas Cole was sitting in her kitchen. He stood up when she came in and he smiled, and he was handsome in the way that costs money, and he said, You must be Clara. Nathan never wrote me a word about you. Isn't that just like him? And he put out his hand. She didn't take it. Where's my husband? Riding fence. He'll be an hour. Silas sat back down comfortable as a cat and picked up her teacup, and looked at it. You've made changes. It's a different house? Have I? There's a cup in it. He laughed. For 8 years there wasn't a cup out of the cupboard in this house. Nate would eat standing up over the sink like a dog. I'd come out here twice a year just to make sure he was still breathing. That was kind of you. He's family. Said Clara, and she poured herself coffee and sat down across from him and did not blink for 4 seconds, and Silas Cole's smile got a half-inch smaller. You've got the books out, he said. I do. Nate let you at the books. He did. Huh. Silas turned his cup in a slow circle. Well, God love him, but he's never been able to make head nor tail of them. Our uncle kept everything in his hat. When he passed it all just sort of... He made a gesture. I've told Nate a dozen times I'd take them off his hands. Just haul the whole mess to Cheyenne and set it right. He won't have it. Proud. He is proud. That's the Cole in him. Is it in you? Silas laughed. It was a good laugh. It was a laugh he'd worked on. Mrs. Cole, he said, you're direct. I've been told. So am I, so let me be direct. He set the cup down. I'll be honest with you since you're family. Now I was glad when I heard. Relieved. He needed someone. Man can't run 4,000 acres and grieve at the same time. Something's got to give, and for 8 years it's been the ranch that gave. But I'll say the other thing too because somebody ought to. Please, don't let him lean on you. Silas's voice went kind. It went very kind, and that was when she understood exactly what he was. He'll do it. He'll put the whole weight of that place on you and call it trust. And in 5 years, you'll be 40 and worn out, and you'll look up and realize he never once asked what you wanted, because Nate doesn't ask. He decides, and then he waits, and then he calls it fate. Clara did not move a muscle in her face. That's very generous advice, she said. It's not generous, it's family. Mr. Cole? Silas. Mr. Cole. She smiled. Can I ask you something about the feed? The room changed temperature. It was such a small thing. It was one word. But Clara had spent 11 days living inside those invoices, and she'd learned every ridge of that man's handwriting without ever having seen his face. And she watched him hear the word feed, and she watched something go behind his eyes and lock a door. The feed, he said pleasantly. Sharp and Son. Old Emmett, good man. Was he Best in the territory. Said Clara. When did you see him last? And Silas Cole, who was good, who was very good, who had been doing this for 4 years and had never once been asked a question, said, "Oh, this spring." Clara set down her cup. "He's been dead 3 years," she said. The silence went on so long she could hear a horse cough in the yard. Then Silas Cole laughed again, and it was a beautiful piece of work, and he said, "Well, hell, am I thinking of the son? I'm thinking of the son. They look just alike. It's the son I saw." And Clara said, "Emmett Sharp had a daughter," which was a lie, and she watched him take it. He took it whole. He nodded. He said, "The daughter, of course." And that was the end of Silas Cole, and neither of them said another word about it. And they sat there in that kitchen for 40 minutes, talking about the weather, both of them knowing, neither of them saying. And Clara had never been so frightened in her life, and had never enjoyed herself more. Nathan came in at 4. "Silas," he said, and there was nothing in his voice at all. "Nate, I didn't know you were coming." "October." Silas spread his hands. "I always come in October." Clara stood up. "Nathan, your cousin was just leaving." Both men looked at her. "I don't believe I was," said Silas. "I believe you were," said Clara. "Because Max got your horse saddled, and because it's 9 miles to town, and you'll want the light." "Clara," Nathan said quietly. "What's?" "Ask me in an hour." And Silas Cole stood up slow, and put on his hat, and looked at Nathan with an expression of such warm, brotherly concern that Clara wanted to throw the coffee pot at his head. "Nate," he said, "how well do you know this woman?" And Nathan Cole said 8 years. Silas stopped in the doorway. Clara did not breathe. "What?" said Silas. "Ride safe," said Nathan, and he held the door open until his cousin walked through it. The door shut. Clara stood in the middle of the kitchen, and her hands were shaking, and there were 2 enormous facts in the room, and she could only pick up one of them at a time. She picked up the small one. "It's him," she said. "It's Silas. It's been Silas for 4 years, $2,160, and I can prove every dollar of it, and if you want, I'll lay it out on this table right now." Nathan didn't move from the door. "I know," he said. Clara's ears rang. "You know, 3 years. You—" She sat down. She had to. "Nathan Cole, you knew, and you let him sit in your kitchen and drink out of my—" "He's my aunt's boy." Nathan's voice was flat as a table. "She died when he was 6. My father raised him half the time. Silas and I slept in the same room till I was 14. He was at my mother's funeral. He carried the—" He stopped. He started again. "He carried one corner. So he gets to rob you. He gets to be the last one left," Nathan said. And Clara opened her mouth to be furious and found she couldn't do it, because that was the whole man right there. The entire architecture of him, laid bare on a kitchen floor. Nathan Cole would rather be robbed by family than be alone with strangers. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," she said. "Probably. It's also over." "Clara, no. No. She was up again. "You gave me a year, and I'm spending it today. You want to keep him. Keep him. Have him for Christmas. Hand him a fork. But he does not touch the money again. Nathan, not $1, because that money isn't yours. It's mine." "It is not." Her voice cracked. "That money's Mac's pension. That's a new roof on the bunkhouse. That's the Lundgren boys' schooling. That money's got 40 people standing behind it, and you're letting one thief take it because he carried a corner of your mother's coffin in 1874. Nathan stared at her. "Say that again," he said. "Which part?" "It's Mac's pension." "It is Mac's?" "Nobody's ever—" He stopped dead. He put a hand on the back of the chair. "Nobody has ever said that in this house, in 15 years. Not one person has walked into this room and told me what my money was for." And Clara Cole, who had been ready to fight him for an hour, watched her husband turn away toward the window with his jaw working and understood with a lurch that she had just heard him in some place that had nothing to do with the argument. "Nathan, write it," he said without turning. "Write him a letter. Say it however you want. Say it in numbers. He'll believe numbers." A breath. "Sign my name to it." "I'll sign my own." "Clara, he'll what, hate me?" She almost laughed. "Nathan, they already hate me. Every soul in that town, from the Reverend's wife to the dogs. You think I'm saving room on the list?" And Nathan Cole turned around, and he looked at her, and he said the thing that ruined the whole night. "They don't hate you. They hate that I've got you." Then he went out to the barn, and Clara stood there with her hand on the table for a long, long time. She wrote the letter that night. It ran 3 pages, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever composed, and there was not one insult in it, and not one accusation, only columns, only dates, only the dead man's letterhead reproduced in her own careful hand with the word "note" beside it, and at the bottom she wrote, "Mr. Cole, you may consider this a courtesy. The next document you receive on this subject will not be from me. C.A. Cole." She read it to Nathan at the table. He listened to the whole thing without moving. "Clara," he said when she finished, "he'll come after you." "Let him. You don't understand. He won't come at me. He can't. He's got nothing on me. He'll come at you sideways in town in that church with his hat in his hand, looking sorrowful, and by spring there won't be a woman in this county who'll—" "Nathan." She folded the letter. "Do you know what I did the week my father died?" "No. I went to 11 houses and I asked 11 people for help, and every one of them said no." She sealed it. "Kindly. They all said it very kindly. So you'll forgive me if I'm not afraid of what the county thinks. The county already had its chance to think something about me." Nathan didn't answer. She looked up and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't stand, open, undefended, devastated, and she said too sharply, "What?" And he said, "Nothing." And she said, "Nathan, I swear before God if you say nothing to me one more time." "You gave your coat away," Nathan said. Clara went cold. "What?" "Winter of '84. He was looking at the table now. "The Dolan family. 6 kids, and the man's back broke. You gave the woman your coat in the street and told her you had another one at home." The clock ticked. Clara couldn't feel her hands. "I didn't have another one," she whispered. "I know. Nathan." Her voice came out very small. "How do you know that?" And Nathan Cole stood up and said, "It's late," and walked out of the kitchen, and Clara heard the front door, and then the barn door, and then nothing. She wrote in the back of her diary that night under things that don't add in handwriting that wasn't quite steady. The coat. Winter '84. He wasn't there. There were 4 people on that street and he was not one of them. And then below it, 8 years. And then she blew out the lamp and lay in the dark with her heart going like a hammer and did not sleep at all. The letter went out Tuesday. The answer came the following Sunday, and it did not come in an envelope. It came at the church social, which Clara had refused to attend 4 times, and attended the 5th because Bess Tanner turned up at the ranch and said, "Honey, if you don't show your face, they'll write your obituary, and it'll be funny." And Clara had thought about that for a long minute, and then gone upstairs to change. She wore the gray. She did her hair herself. Nathan drove her in and hardly said a word the whole 9 miles, and at the church steps he stopped the wagon and said, "You don't have to do this." "I do, though." "Clara." "Nathan." She looked straight ahead. "If I don't walk in there today, I'll never walk in there. Not in 10 years. Not at my own child's christening." She heard the words come out of her own mouth and felt the floor drop. Neither of them moved. "I only meant," she started. "I know what you meant," said Nathan, and his voice was not steady, and he got down and came around and put up his hand to help her, and Clara took it. It was the first time she'd touched him. They both noticed. Neither of them said so. She let go a half-second later than she needed to and hated herself the whole way up the steps. It was fine for 40 minutes. That was the cruelest part. It was fine. Mrs. Hollister was warm. The Marsden girls were curious. Old Doc Pearsall told her a long story about a horse. Clara stood there with a cup of punch and thought with a dawning dangerous hope. Oh, it's going to be all right. Then she went out the side door for air and heard her husband's voice around the corner in the yard talking to 3 men. All I'm saying, Cole, is a man makes a decision like that, folks are entitled to wonder. Folks can wonder. $900 is a lot of wondering. Delmer Kane. Of course it was Delmer Kane. And another voice, younger and smoother, and from Cheyenne, said, easy as Sunday. Oh, leave him be, Del. It's not romance, it's management. Nate needed the place run. She can run it. That's the whole of it. Isn't that right, Nate? Silas. Clara stood with her back flat against the church wall and her cup shaking in her hand and the world going very narrow. Say it, she thought. Say it, Nathan. Say one word. Say her name. Say she's my wife. And there was a pause. It went on 3 seconds, and Nathan Cole said, that's right. Kane laughed. Somebody clapped somebody on the shoulder. Silas said something else and they all laughed again, and Clara heard her own voice in her head, saying very calmly, the way it said numbers. Well, there it is. She didn't cry. She walked back inside and put her cup down and said to Bess Tanner, I need to go home. And Bess took one look at her face and said, I'll get the wagon. And Clara said, no, I'd like to walk. And Bess said, Clara, it's 9 miles. And Clara said, I know exactly how far it is. She walked 4 of them before he caught her. She heard the horse and didn't turn around. Clara. Nothing. Clara. Clara. He was off the horse. Bess said, you don't. Would you stop? Don't touch me. And Nathan Cole stopped in the road with his hand halfway out like she'd shot him. She turned around. That's right, she said. He went white. Clara! It's not romance, it's management. Isn't that right, Nate? That's right. Her voice was rising, and she let it. Do you know what I was doing while you said that I was standing 4 feet away with a cup of punch in my hand, thinking he's going to say something? Isn't that stupid? Isn't that the stupidest thing you ever heard? 11 weeks in that house, and I still thought, he was baiting me. I know he was baiting you, she screamed. I know that. That's not the point. The point is, he baited you with me, and you took it. If I'd said one word about you, Nathan said, he'd have had it in Cheyenne by Thursday, and in this town by Friday, and you'd have spent the rest of your life being the woman Nathan Cole made a fool of himself over. He wants that. That's the whole reason he came. He wants me to care out loud so he can use it. Then let him use it. Clara. Let him use it. She had both fists closed. God almighty, Nathan, you'd rather they thought you bought me than know you. She stopped. The words sat there in the road between them, unsaid, enormous. Nathan Cole didn't move. Say it, he said quietly. Clara couldn't. You started it, he said. Finish it. No. Clara. No, she said, because if I say it and I'm wrong, I will not survive it. And her voice broke straight in half on the last word, and she turned around and started walking again. He didn't follow her. She got about 30 yards. Then behind her, in the empty road, Nathan Cole said, There's a room at the back of the house. Clara stopped. I know, she said without turning. You want to know why I said no when you asked why I married you. You want to know why I said no when you asked about the coat and why I said no when you asked about the piano and why I've said no to you every day since July. His voice was doing something terrible. It's all the same no, Clara. It's one no. It's in that room. Clara turned around. He was standing in the middle of the road holding his horse, and he looked like a man on a scaffold. Then open it, she said. I can't. Nathan, I can't. And he laughed, and it was the worst sound she'd ever heard out of a human being. You think I'm keeping it from you. I'm not. I'm keeping you from it. Because the day you open that door, you'll know everything. And then you'll do one of two things, and one of them I've had 8 years to get used to, and the other one I have no idea how to survive." "What are the two things?" "You'll stay," Nathan said, "or you'll run." "And which one are you afraid of?" And Nathan Cole looked at her across 10 feet of road and said, "Both." Then he got on his horse and rode away and left her standing in the middle of the county, 5 miles from home, with the sun going down. She walked it. She got to the ranch at full dark, with her feet bleeding through her stockings, and there was a lamp in the window, and a plate on the stove, and a chair pulled out from the table, and Nathan was nowhere, and she sat down and ate every bite of it and cried the entire time. The next morning he was gone before she came down. There was a note on the table. She'd never seen his handwriting outside a ledger. It said, "Fence is down at the north line, back Wednesday. There's a boy coming Tuesday about the winter work. His name is Amos Dolan, and I would like you to hire him if you find him suitable. N." Clara read it 4 times. Then she sat down very slowly. Dolan. 6 kids and the man's back broke, and a woman in the street in the winter of '84. She put her head in her hands. Tuesday came. The boy was 19 and shy and had his mother's chin, and Clara hired him in about 4 minutes and then sat with him at the kitchen table for an hour, asking about nothing at all about the weather, about his brothers, about how they'd got through that winter, and Amos Dolan said cheerfully with no idea what he was doing to her, "Oh, we'd have starved, ma'am, honest. It was the coal that saved us. Somebody paid our coal all that winter and never said who. Ma about lost her mind trying to find out. She asked the coal man straight out, and he said he'd been paid a year ahead by a fella who told him if he ever said the name, he'd never sell another lump in this county." Clara heard herself say, "Did she ever find out?" "No, ma'am." Amos grinned. "She's still mad about it." The boy went out to the barn. Clara sat in that kitchen and did not move for 11 minutes. Then she got up and walked down the hall and stood in front of the locked door and put both hands flat on it and said out loud, "Who are you?" And nobody answered because there was nobody in the house but her. Wednesday, Nathan didn't come back. Thursday, he didn't come back. Thursday night, Mac Rowe knocked on the kitchen door with his hat already off. "Ma'am?" Clara stood up so fast the chair went over. "Is he?" He's fine, ma'am." Mac held up both hands. "He sent me. There's weather coming, and he wants the stock down out of the north lot, and he'll be another 2 days at it, and he said to tell you." The old man stopped. "Mac." "He said to tell you it wasn't about the road." "What wasn't?" "That's all he said, ma'am. He said you'd know." Clara sat down. "It wasn't about the road. He meant I didn't leave you standing there because of what you said. I left you standing there because of what I nearly said." "Mac," she said, "sit down." "Ma'am, I ought to—" Mac Rowe. He sat on the very edge of the chair the way a man sits in a room he's not sure he's allowed in. 22 years, Clara said. "Ma'am, you told me you've been with him 22 years, since he was a boy." She folded her hands. "Mac, what happened in 1880? The old man's face closed like a fist. "Ma'am?" "Bess Tanner told me he'd never buried anybody but the one Mac. And every soul in that town thinks it was a wife, and I've been in that house 4 months, and there's not a woman's thing in it, not a hairpin, not a dress, not a photograph, not one single object in 4,000 acres that says a woman ever lived there." Her voice was steady, and her hands were not. "So it wasn't a wife. Who was it?" Mac Rowe looked at the floor for a long time. "It ain't mine to say." "I know. He'd never forgive me." "I know that too." "Then why are you asking?" And Clara said, "Because I'm going to open that door, Mac. I've decided. I decided about an hour ago, and I haven't told anybody yet, and I'd rather walk in there knowing than walk in there blind, and if you tell me not to, I'll listen. That's the truth. If you look me in the eye right now and say, 'Don't,' I'll leave it shut till the day I die." Mac Rowe looked her in the eye. He looked at her for so long she thought he'd gone somewhere else entirely. Then the old man said very quietly, "His brother." Clara stopped breathing. "Isaac," said Mac. 19 years old. Broke his neck off a horse in the yard on a Sunday morning in front of God and everybody, and Nate carried him inside. Himself wouldn't let nobody else touch him, carried him in and laid him on the table in the back room and sat there 3 days. 3 days, Clara whispered. Wouldn't come out. Mac's voice had gone thin. Wouldn't let us take him. On the 4th day, I broke the window myself and got him out of there, and he never went in that room again, ma'am. He nailed the door, and he never went in it again, and that was 1880, and I'm the only one alive that knows it. The kitchen was so quiet, Clara could hear the fire. Mac, she said, that's not true. Ma'am, he goes in. She was shaking. He goes in all the time. Mac, there's no dust under that door. I've looked 100 times. There's not one speck of dust on that sill, and there's a track worn in the hall runner that goes to that door and stops, and I've been telling myself for 4 months that I'm imagining it, and I'm not. He goes in there. He goes in there at night. Mac Rowe stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. Ma'am, what's in that room? I don't know. Mac, Mrs. Cole, I swear on my life, the old man said, and his eyes were wet. I do not know, but I'll tell you what I do know, and then I'm going to go, and I ain't never going to speak of it again. He got his hat. His hands were shaking. The winter of '84. You mind that winter? Clara couldn't speak. She nodded. He come out of that house in December of '84 for the first time in 4 years. Just walked out. Saddled up and rode to town, and I thought, well, hell, he's finally lost it. Max swallowed. He come back at midnight and he didn't say a word. And the next morning, ma'am, the next morning, that man asked me to teach him to fix a pair of boots. Clara made a sound. He'd never asked me to teach him nothing in his life, Max said. Not one thing. Not in 22 years. He put his hat on. And I never asked him why. I just showed him. And he practiced on old harness leather in that barn for 4 years, ma'am, 4 years, and I never once seen him fix a boot. He opened the door. Till August, said Mac Rowe, and he went out. Clara Cole sat in that kitchen for a very long time. The wind came up around 10. By 11, it was screaming, and the rain came in sideways, and somewhere out in the dark, a shutter tore off the west side of the house and went end over end into the night, and the whole valley lit up white for half a second and went black again. She got the lamp. She went down the hall. She stood in front of the door with the storm shaking the house and her hand on the latch, and she said out loud to a man who was 40 miles away in the weather with 300 head of cattle, Nathan Cole, God forgive me, I need to know who you are. And she turned the handle, and it was open. It had been open the whole time. She stood there with her hand on the latch, and the door swung in an inch and stopped, and Clara Cole did not go through it. She stood in that hallway for a full minute, with the storm tearing at the house, and she thought very clearly the way she thought about numbers. He never locked it. 4 months. 4 months of walking past that door with her jaw set. 4 months of telling herself she was an honorable woman, keeping an honorable bargain. 4 months of, you don't ask Miss Whitmore, and the whole time the door had been sitting there loose in its frame like a hand held out. It hadn't been a lock at all. It had been a test, and she'd been passing it every single day without knowing, and she was about to fail it on purpose. That's not fair, she said out loud to nobody, and her voice cracked. Nathan, that's not fair. Because a locked door you could break. A locked door made you the thief, and him the wronged man, and everything simple. But an unlocked door meant he'd trusted her with it every hour for 4 months, and if she walked through it now, she couldn't even hate him for making her. She took her hand off the latch. She got as far as the kitchen. She got as far as sitting down at the table with the lamp between her hands and saying out loud, I'm not going to. And she said it twice, and the second time she heard how it sounded, and she put her face down on the table and laughed until it turned into something else. Then she picked up the lamp and went back down the hall and went in. There was a bed. That was the first thing, and it was the thing that nearly put her on the floor. There was a bed in that room, made-up blankets squared a pillow with the case ironed, and it had been made up like that for 6 years, by a man who came in at night and never lay down in it. There was a table. There was a chair pulled out from the table at an angle the way a chair is when somebody stood up quick and didn't push it in. There was a coat on a peg, a young man's coat, too small for Nathan by a foot. Clara set the lamp on the table because her hands had stopped working. Isaac, 19 years old, on a Sunday morning in the yard, and his brother had carried him in here and laid him on that table and sat with him for 3 days, and then nailed the door, and then apparently pulled the nails out again some night when nobody was watching and started coming back. She put her hand on the back of the chair. She said, "I'm sorry," to a boy who'd been dead 6 years. And then she saw the box. It was under the bed. She saw it because the lamp threw the light low, and there was a corner of wood sticking out an inch past the blanket, and she got down on her knees on that floor and pulled it out, and it was heavier than it had any right to be, and there was no lock on that either. She opened it. Paper. The whole box. Not a photograph, not a keepsake, not a lock of a dead boy's hair. Paper folded, hundreds of sheets packed edge to edge, and every single one of them dated in the corner in that terrible handwriting she'd spent 4 months learning to read. She took the top one. October 4th, 1886. She found the feed bills. Silas is finished. She did it in 11 days, and she was in a temper the whole time because she wanted it done in 3. She has no idea what she looks like when she's working. I couldn't tell her. There isn't a way to say it that doesn't sound like a man taking liberties. She told me tonight that my money was max pension. I had to leave the room. Clara sat down flat on the floor. She read it again. She read it 4 times. She turned it over like there'd be an explanation on the back. October 4th was 11 days ago. He'd written this 11 days ago. In this room. At night. While she was asleep upstairs. She dropped it and took another. August 19th, 1886. She asked me if I intend to speak to her at any point in this marriage. I said, about what? Like a fool. Like an absolute fool. I had 8 years to think of something to say, and that's what came out. Gave her the ledgers. All of them. I couldn't watch her take them, so I went out the door while I said it. She'll think I don't care. I don't know how to tell her I've been keeping that drawer shut for 6 years because it was the last thing I could still fail at quietly. Clara made a noise she'd never made before. She grabbed a handful 5, 6 sheets, and they were all it. They were all her. Every one of them, and the dates went backward like steps down into a well. July 30th. She wore the gray dress today, and I said, "You look fine." And then I left the room because I could feel my face doing something. July 22nd. Married her Thursday. She said, "I do like a woman signing a receipt." I nearly didn't get mine out. 9 minutes. The whole thing took 9 minutes, and I've been waiting 8 years. July 19th. She came to the door. She came to my door. I said no. I said no to her. I want that written down so that if I ever tell anybody this story, I can't lie about it. She stood in my house and asked me to marry her, and I said no, because for about 4 seconds I thought if she's only here because she's got nowhere else, then I've won her the way you win a horse at auction, and I would rather die. Then she told me about the 40 cents. Then I said yes to everything. Clara's hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. She went down. She went further down into the box, and the dates went 1885, 1884, and her whole chest was one long, tearing sound. December 14th, 1884. She gave her coat away. Standing in the street in front of the mercantile, she took her coat off and put it on Mary Dolan, and said she had another one at home. She doesn't have another one at home. I was in the alley by Pell's office. I'd come to town for nails I didn't need. That's the truth, and I'll write it. I came to town for nails I didn't need on the chance. Paid the coal. Told the man if he says my name, I'll ruin him. Bought her a coat, and got as far as the front step of the Whitmore place with it, and stood there like a lunatic, and took it home again, because there is no version of that where she doesn't know. And if she knows, she'll have to be kind about it. And I would rather have my hand cut off than make that woman be kind to me out of pity. The coat's in the box. It's still in the box. Clara looked up. There was a box on the shelf. A store box. 6 years of dust on the lid, and the string still tied. She got up off the floor and untied the string, and there was a coat in it folded in paper gray wool unworn, and she picked it up and put it against her face and stood there in the middle of that room and cried in a way she had not cried since she was 9 years old. Not at her father's grave. Not once the whole 11 days. Here. For a coat. She sat back down and kept reading because she was Clara Whitmore, and she had never in her life been able to leave a column unfinished. March 1884. She's keeping the Reverend's books. Pike's eyes are going. She won't take money for it. Pell says she does it Thursday nights by lamp after working her father's ground all day. I do not know how to be a man who deserves that. November 1883. Her father's mortgaging again. He doesn't read what he signs. I could buy the paper. I could buy every note that man ever signed and burn it in the yard, and she'd never know. But she'd know. She'd get out a pencil, and she'd know inside a week, because that's who she is, and then it wouldn't be a kindness. It'd be a debt. And she'd spend the rest of her life paying a man back for something he did to feel good about himself. So, I sat on my hands. God help me. I sat on my hands and let it happen because I couldn't think of a way to help her that didn't cost her the only thing she owns. Clara put the letter down. You could have asked me, she said out loud, and it came out of her like a wound. Nathan, you could have knocked on the door and asked. She went further. The handwriting got worse as the years went back, worse and smaller and harder, and the entries got shorter, and then she hit 1881, and it stopped being letters at all. February 1881. Bad week. March 1881. Bad month. May 1881. Mac made me eat. September 1881. Nothing. November 1881. Nothing. Page after page of nothing. A man leaving a mark in a box to prove he'd gotten through another month, and no other reason, and no other content, and no other soul on earth to tell. And then at the very bottom, folded twice the paper gone soft as cloth from being handled June 6, 1878. Clara stopped. 1878. 8 years. He'd said 8 years in the doorway to Silas, and she'd assumed he meant something loose, some manner of speaking. June 6, 1878. Isaac made me go to the Whitmore girls' birthday party. He said if I didn't go, he'd tell Pa I was the one that broke the gate. He's 15 and already a better man than me. She's 17 today. She spent the whole party in the kitchen because the Marsden girl spilled punch on her mother's tablecloth and cried about it, and Clara Whitmore washed that cloth out by hand for an hour and came back in and told everyone it had come out fine. It had not come out fine. I saw it. She'd folded the stain under and set a dish on it, and then she made that girl laugh. I have thought about it all the way home, and I want to put down exactly what happened to me because I am 19 and I expect I'll be stupid about this later, and I want the record. Nothing happened. Nobody said anything to me. She didn't say one word to me the whole day. She doesn't know my name. But she took the ruined thing and put it where it wouldn't hurt anybody, and then went and made the person who ruined it feel better about it. I've never seen anybody do that. Not once in my whole life. Isaac says I've gone soft in the head. Maybe. But I'm going to write this down and put it away, and someday when I'm 40 and married to somebody sensible, I'll find it and laugh. Her name is Clara. Clara Cole sat on the floor of a dead boy's bedroom with a letter in her hand from a 19-year-old who had been dead in every way that mattered for 6 years, and she understood the entire thing at once. The whole 8 years, all of it, the way a column adds. Isaac made me go. Isaac had made him go to the party. Isaac had put him in that room. And then Isaac had broken his neck in the yard 2 years later, and Nathan Cole had stopped being a person, and the only thing that had survived, the only thing he'd carried out of that fire, was a 17-year-old girl washing a tablecloth in a kitchen. That was why the letters were in this room. They weren't hidden from her. They were with Isaac. He'd been coming in here for 6 years to talk to his brother about a girl. "Oh," Clara said. And then she said, "Oh," again, and put her hand over her mouth, and the storm hammered the house, and somewhere under it she heard a horse in the yard. She heard him come in. She heard the front door, and she heard him stop because there was a light on in the back of the house, and there had never in 6 years been a light on in the back of the house. She didn't move. She couldn't have. She was on the floor with his whole life in her lap, and a dead boy's coat on the peg above her, and she could not have stood up if the roof came off. The footsteps came down the hall. They stopped in the doorway. Neither of them said anything for a long, long time. Then Nathan Cole said in a voice with nothing left in it at all, "You found it." Clara couldn't look up. "The door was open," she said. "I know." "Nathan, the door was open." "I know it was. You told me—" Her voice went. She got it back. "You made me sign Nathan. You made me sign my name to it, and I kept it. I kept it for 4 months, and I never touched that handle, not once. And tonight I finally— and it was open. It was open the whole—" "It's been open since August," Nathan said. Clara's head came up. He was standing in the doorway, soaking wet, and he looked 90 years old. "August," she said. "The night you found the theft." He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the chair, at the angle of the chair. "You sat me down at that table, and you said my whole name, and I did what you told me, and then Mac knocked, and I went out to the fire. And when I came back in at dawn, I came down this hall, and I pulled the nails, and I left it open." He swallowed. "And then I waited." "You waited? 4 months. For what?" And Nathan Cole said, "For you to decide." Clara got up off that floor. She got up with the letter still in her fist, and she crossed that room, and she stood in front of her husband, and she was so angry she could barely see. "You waited for me to break my word," she said. "No. Yes. Yes, that's exactly. Nathan, you sat in that barn for 4 months waiting for me to sneak down a hall in the dark and go through your things like a thief, and if I did it, then it's my fault, isn't it? Then you never told me anything. Then you never had to stand in a room and say a word out loud in your whole life because I took it." "That's right," Nathan said. Clara stopped. "What?" "That's right." His face was breaking apart. "That's exactly right. That's what I did. Clara, I know what I did. I've known every night for 4 months. I'd lie out there in that barn and think she's honorable, and I'm counting on her not to be. I'm counting on it, because if she takes it, it's not my fault. And if she never takes it, then I get to keep pretending I'd have told her someday. That's cowardice." "Yes," said Nathan. "That's the worst thing I've ever heard a man say about himself." "Yes," said Nathan. "Don't agree with me," she screamed, and she hit him. She hit him in the chest with the flat of her hand, hard, and the letters went out of her fist and all over the floor, 8 years of paper everywhere, and Nathan Cole didn't lift a finger to stop her. "I've been in that house 4 months thinking I was a fool," she said. 4 months thinking I'd walked into a bargain with a man who couldn't stand the sight of me. Do you know what that's like? Do you know what it's like to sit across a table from somebody and try to work out what you did wrong? To go over it, to go over every word, Nathan, every night, trying to find the place where I know. You don't. Clara, I've been doing it since 1878, Nathan Cole said, and that stopped her dead. That's not the same. No, it's not. He didn't move. It's worse. You did it for 4 months about a man you were married to. I did it for 8 years about a woman who didn't know my name. Clara stood there with her chest heaving. Say it, she said. Clara, you told me in the road. You said say it, you started it, finish it. Her whole face was wet. Well, now I'm saying it to you. You've had 8 years and a box full of paper, and you've said it 400 times to a room. Say it once to me. Nathan Cole opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Clara watched him try. She watched him stand there in a wet coat with his brother's bed made up behind him and his whole life on the floor at his feet. And she watched her husband try to say 4 words and physically fail the way a man with a broken back tries to stand. And something in her went from fury to something so much worse. Nathan, she whispered. I can't, he said. Why? Because the second I say it, Nathan said, you've got to answer. And there it was, the whole man, The entire architecture. 8 years of a box under a bed, instead of 9 words on a doorstep, and it wasn't shyness, and it wasn't pride, and it wasn't even grief. It was that as long as he never said it, she never had to say no. "You'd rather have this," Clara said slowly. "You'd rather have 4 months of me hating you across a table than 1 minute of knowing." "Yes." "Nathan, that's not love. That's hiding." "I know what it is," he said. "Then why?" "Because I've been told no by everything I ever loved," Nathan Cole shouted. The room rang. "My mother said she'd be fine, and she wasn't," he said, and his voice was coming apart entirely now. "And my father said he'd be fine, and he wasn't. And Isaac got on a horse on a Sunday morning and said, 'Watch this, Clara.' He said, 'Watch this.' And I watched him do it. And 11 seconds later, I'm carrying my brother into this room, and he's already gone." He stopped. He was breathing like a man drowning. "And every single one of them, everyone I found out after, I never got to decide anything, not one time in my life. I just stood there and found out." Clara couldn't speak. "And then you came to my door," he said. "And for the first time in 8 years, I had the thing in my hands. Right there, in my house. And all I had to do was never open my mouth, and I could keep it." "Keep what?" "Not knowing," said Nathan Cole. He sat down. He sat down right there on the floor of his brother's room with his back against the doorframe, and he put his head in his hands, and Clara Cole stood over him and thought with a strange, terrible calm, "I could end him right now. One word. I could end this man." She knelt down. "Nathan," she said, "look at me." He didn't. "Nathan Cole, you look at me." He looked. "That first day," she said, "on that road, at the fork, I stopped." "I know," he said. "I saw. You told me you saw. You told me you sat there 11 minutes. Her voice was shaking so hard she could barely get it out. "Nathan, do you know why I stopped? Because you were choosing." "No." She shook her head. "I'd already chosen. I chose at 4 in the morning at my father's table. I stopped because I was trying to make myself believe I was doing it for the money." Nathan went absolutely still. "I'd seen you," Clara said, "twice a winter buying nails. And I'd looked, Nathan. God forgive me, I'd looked, and I'd told myself I was looking, because everybody looks at the strange man from the big ranch, and then I'd get home and I couldn't tell you what anybody else in that store was wearing, but I could tell you what you were." She was crying now and not doing anything about it. "So I stood at that fork for a quarter of an hour, trying to make it into arithmetic. Because if it was arithmetic, I could survive being turned down. And if it wasn't, Clara. And then you said no." She said, "And I want you to understand what that did to me. I want you to understand. I stood in your parlor, and you said no. And I have never in my whole life wanted to die the way I wanted to die in that half second. And then I got angry because angry is the only thing I know how to do instead of falling down." Clara. "Yeah." "And I told you your books were a mess. And I left and you said, 'How much?' And I said $932.40, Nathan. And do you know why I said the 40 cents? He couldn't answer. "Because I wanted you to think I was interesting," Clara said. And Nathan Cole made a sound like something being pulled out of him. "I wanted you to think I was interesting," she said again. "And I have been ashamed of that for 4 months. I have lain in that bed and been ashamed of that. Thinking he bought you, Clara. He paid the bank, and you stood there flirting about pennies." "Stop." "And the whole time," she said, "the whole time you had a coat in a box." Nathan put both hands over his face. 6 years, Clara said. "There's a coat on that shelf, and it's been there 6 years, and you stood on my father's porch with it, and you took it home again. Don't. Why didn't you knock? Don't. Nathan Cole, why didn't you knock?" And Nathan Cole said from behind his hands in a voice that wasn't anything at all, "Because you'd have said thank you." The storm hit the house. Clara sat back on her heels. "That's it," she said. "That's the whole of it, isn't it? You'd rather I froze." "Yes." "You'd rather I froze." Yes, because if you take the coat, then in 10 years you're 40, and you're standing in my kitchen, and one day you're going to look up and count what it cost you, because you count everything, Clara, that's what you are, and I would have been a line in it. He was shaking. I'd have been an entry. $932, and I gave him the rest of my life. And I'd have to sit across a table from that arithmetic every day until one of us died. Clara stared at him. You absolute fool, she said. Probably. No, listen to me. She grabbed his wrists and pulled his hands down off his face and made him look at her. Nathan, you listen. Do you want to know what my ledger says? The real one, I keep one. In the back of my diary. 4 months of it. You want to know what's in it? Clara. The fence, she said. The boots. The blankets. The tea I mentioned once. The book I never bought. Mrs. Lundgren's bill. Her voice broke wide open. I titled it, Things That Don't Add. 4 months, Nathan. 4 months of a woman sitting up at night with a pencil trying to work out why a man who couldn't stand to be in a room with her kept fixing her boots. Nathan wasn't breathing. And at the bottom, Clara said, at the bottom of the list in little writing, because I couldn't make myself cross it out, he knew my name before I said it. The lamp guttered. Nathan, she said. I've had a box too. Mine was smaller and it was in the wrong order and I didn't know what it was. But I had one. She was gripping his wrists so hard her knuckles were white. So don't you dare tell me you'd have been an entry. You've been the only entry since August. There's nothing else in the book. Nathan Cole looked at his wife. Say it, Clara said. And he opened his mouth, and outside in the yard, in the middle of the worst storm the valley had seen in 9 years, somebody started pounding on the door. Neither of them moved. The pounding came again, hard, both fists. No, Clara said. No, Nathan, don't you dare. He was already getting up. Nathan Cole, if you walk out of this room right now, I swear to God. Clara, somebody's out in that. I don't care. And it was so unlike her, so completely unlike her, that they both stopped and looked at each other in a kind of horror. The pounding came a third time. Nathan went. She stood in that hallway, with her fists closed, and heard him open the front door, and heard the storm come in, and heard a voice, a woman's voice screaming over the wind, and then Nathan saying something, and then the door slamming. She came out. Bess Tanner was standing in the front room, dripping and white as a sheet, and she had a paper in her hand, and when she saw Clara, she said the worst 4 words of Clara Cole's life. Honey, where's your husband? He's right there, Bess. No. Bess grabbed her arm. Clara, where is he legally? And she put the paper in Clara's hands. Clara read it. She read it twice because she read everything twice. Then she said, This isn't real. It's real. Pell posted it at 4 o'clock and I got on a horse. Bess, this isn't real. Clara, it says the marriage is void. Clara's voice had gone strange and high. It says Nathan. It says the marriage is... Nathan took it out of her hands. He read it. And Clara watched her husband's face go from grief to something entirely different, something she'd never seen on him and would never forget. And he said one word, Silas. It's got the county seal on it, Bess said. There's a lawyer's name. There's a judge's name, Nathan. On what grounds? Clara said. On what grounds, Bess, we stood up in that church, Reverend Pike. And Bess Tanner said, Honey, the grounds are you. Clara stopped. Me. It says, Bess couldn't do it. She looked at Nathan. Cole, you tell her. Somebody tell me. And Nathan Cole said without any expression whatsoever, reading off the page, Petition for annulment on grounds of fraud. That the woman Clara Ann Whitmore, being in debt in the sum of $932, did knowingly present herself for marriage for the purpose of settlement of said debt, and did so with no intention of a true marriage, and that the said marriage has never been... He stopped. Never been what? Clara said. Nathan didn't answer. Nathan? Never been what? Consummated, said Bess Tanner very quietly. The room went absolutely silent. Clara stood there. "How?" she said. "How does he, Bess? How does a man in Cheyenne?" And then she saw it. She saw it the way she saw a column that didn't add all at once the whole thing, and her blood went to ice. "He slept in the barn," she said. Nobody spoke. "Nathan slept in the barn for 6 weeks, and every hand on this place knew it," she said. "Mac knew. The Lundgren boy knew. Amos Dolan knew he's been here 3 weeks, and he knew he told me he said Mr. Cole keeps a cot out there." "Clara," Nathan said. "And Silas was in my kitchen in October, drinking out of my cup. And he said there's a cup in it. He said for 8 years there wasn't a cup out of the cupboard." She had both hands in her hair. "He came out here to count things. He wasn't visiting. He was taking an inventory." "Clara, and I sent him a letter," she said. Nathan closed his eyes. "I sent him a letter," Clara said, "with my name on it and my numbers in it. And I told him, oh God, Nathan, I told him the next document you receive on this subject will not be from me. Clara, stop." "And he read it," she said. "And he thought, well then, let's see whose document gets there first." Bess Tanner sat down on a chair like her legs had quit. "There's more," she said. Clara turned. "There can't be more. There's a hearing." Bess wouldn't look up. "It's set. Pell had to post it. He didn't want to. He was near crying about it. It's the 12th. "The 12th, Clara repeated. "Of December." "That's Bess, that's 7 weeks. And Clara." Bess finally looked at her. "He's not just asking to void it. Honey, listen to me. He's asking the court to void it, and then he's filing on the ranch. 9% and a fraud on the estate. He's saying you two cooked it up together, that Nathan married you to get the books out of his reach, so nobody'd ever find out what Nathan's been doing with the money." Nathan hadn't moved. "He's turning it around," Clara whispered. "He's Nathan. He's saying you're the thief." "Yes," said Nathan. "He's got 4 years of forged invoices in his handwriting." "On my paper," Nathan said. "In my house. Paid out of my account. Signed for by me, Clara, everyone, because I signed everything because I never looked." The house creaked in the wind. "And the only person in this county," Nathan said slowly, "who can prove it wasn't me, who's the only one who ever went into those books, who found it, who understood it." He looked at her. "Is the woman he's about to have declared not my wife," he said. Clara Cole put her hand on the wall. "Because a wife can't be made to testify against her husband," she said. "But a stranger can be made to testify about anything." "Yes. And if the marriage never existed?" "Then there's no wife," said Nathan. "There's just a bookkeeper with a motive and $900 in her pocket." The lamp went out. Nobody moved to light it. And in the dark, Clara Cole heard her husband say in a voice she had never once heard from him. Not grief, not fear, not that terrible flatness. Something else entirely. "Bess, can you ride back tonight? In this coal I'll die. Then you'll stay till it breaks, and you'll ride at first light." He was already moving. "And you'll go to Pell, and you'll tell him Nathan Cole is coming to town Monday, and he's bringing every ledger his family has kept since 1871, and he'd like the county recorder to open the vault." "Nathan," Clara said, "if you open those books in public—" "I know. Everything's in them. Everything. 15 years. The Dolan's Cole. Mrs. Lundgren's bill. The Reverend's—" She stopped. "Nathan, my debt is in them. I know. Everybody in that county will see the number." "Yes." "They'll see the date," Clara said. "Nathan, they'll see the date. They'll see you paid the bank on the 19th of July, and we married on the 22nd, and there is not one soul in that town who won't count those 3 days and come to exactly the wrong—" "Clara, they'll say he bought me," she screamed. And in the dark, Nathan Cole said, "Then let them count." Clara couldn't see him. She could only hear him. "Let them count every dollar," he said. "Let them get out a pencil. Let Pike and Kane and Mrs. Marsden and the whole rotten lot of them sit in that courtroom and add it up." His voice was shaking now, but it wasn't breaking. It was doing something else, something rising. "Because there's 15 years in those books, Clara, and there's exactly one line in the whole 15 years that's got your name on it, and it's dated July 19th, 1886. Nathan, and there's a box in that back room, he said, and the top letter in it is dated June 6th, 1878. Clara stopped breathing. So let them count, said Nathan Cole. Let them count 8 years and see what they make of it. And Bess Tanner in the corner in the dark said very softly, "Oh, my Lord." Nobody said anything for a while. Then Clara said, "Nathan, that box goes in front of a judge. Everyone in that room reads it. Silas reads it. Delmer Kane reads it. Your whole Nathan, that's your life. That's 8 years of you alone in a room. They'll put it in the paper. They'll laugh." "Yes. You can't." "Clara, you can't," she said. "I won't let you. I'll burn it myself. I'll burn every page." And Nathan Cole said, "You're the one that told me not to shut the drawer." Clara Cole stood in the dark in her own front room and could not think of one single thing to say. "I'll get the lamp," Bess said, and didn't move. And then Nathan said the last thing. He said it quietly, and he said it like a man laying something on a table, and Clara would hear it in her head every night for the next 7 weeks. "There's one problem." "What?" she said. "The letters prove I loved you," Nathan said. "They don't prove you love me, and that's the only thing that hearing's going to ask." Part 1. Lưu ý viết 5.300 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ. Giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần Hải Đắt điểm 10/10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh sửa lời AI, kể theo ngôi thứ 3 tăng độ kịch tính, không viết lẩn mạn, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mức document mới. 2 đến 3 phút cần có mini climax và đặt 10 đến 15. Mini climax mỏi, phần cứ 10 đến 12 phút. Có một twist lớn sâu sắc đan xen, mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8 đến 10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh cho tôi. Show more. Orchestrated emotionally charged narrative continuation, with dialogue-driven pacing and dramatic tension. Orchestrated emotionally charged narrative. Continuation with dialogue-driven pacing and dramatic tension. Clara didn't answer him that night. That was the thing she'd think about later. She had the whole answer sitting right there in her mouth, and she swallowed it because Bess Tanner was in the room, because the lamp was out, because she was a woman who had never once in her life said a true thing out loud without checking the arithmetic first. So she said, "We'll talk about it Monday," and Nathan said, "All right." And that was that, and it sat in the house for 7 weeks like a stone in a boot. Bess rode out at first light. She got to town by 9, and by 10 Pell had it, and by noon the whole county had it, and by supper there wasn't a kitchen in the valley that wasn't chewing on it. Nathan Cole was in Pell's office Monday morning with a wagon out front. He brought all of it. 11 ledgers, 2 crates of receipts, 15 years of a family's money, and he set them on the counter and said, "I'd like these entered into the record." Pell went the color of a fish. "Mr. Cole, sir, you understand these become public. Anybody can walk in here and read them. Anybody." "That's the idea." "Mr. Cole, sir, there's personal matters in a man's books." "There is," said Nathan. "Sir." "Enter them, Mr. Pell." And Pell entered them, and his hand shook the whole time he wrote the receipt. And when Nathan turned to go, the little man said, "Mr. Cole," and Nathan stopped. "My cousin sits on the church board," Pell said, "and he told me a thing 3 years ago I never understood till this minute. Don't. He said somebody paid the Reverend's arrears and told the board if they ever said who he'd, Mr. Pell. Nathan said, 'You've got a wife and 4 children and a job at the pleasure of that county, and my cousin will be in this office inside a week asking you what I said in it. So I'd like you to be able to say honestly that I said nothing." Pell shut his mouth. Nathan went out. He didn't tell Clara about that, and she found out anyway, in 11 days the way she found out everything. Silas Cole came back on the 4th of November. He didn't come to the ranch. He was too good for that. He took a room at Bess Tanner's boarding house. Bess Tanner's, which Clara understood immediately as a piece of theater, because it meant he could sit at breakfast every morning for 5 weeks with his hat in his hand, looking sorrowful, in front of the biggest mouth in the territory. Bess came out that same week and told her, "He's charming everybody, honey." "I know." "Clara, he's good. He sat in my dining room this morning, and he didn't say one word against you. Not one. He said—" Bess stopped. "Say it." "He said, I don't blame her. She was drowning. Anybody'd have grabbed the rope." Clara sat down slowly. "That's clever," she said. "That's filthy." "No, Bess, it's clever." Clara's voice was strange and admiring and cold. "Because now every woman in that dining room gets to feel sorry for me. And you can't fight sorry. You can fight a lie. Sorry just sits there." Bess watched her. "Honey," she said, "what are you going to do?" And Clara Cole said, "I'm going to count." She started that afternoon. She started with the invoices, and then she went past the invoices because the invoices only proved somebody was stealing, and Silas had already turned that around, a forged bill on Nathan's desk, paid out of Nathan's account, signed by Nathan's hand, proved nothing at all, except that money left the ranch. She needed the other end. She needed where it went. She wrote to Cheyenne. 4 letters, all of them polite, all of them lies. She wrote to the Denver outfit that bought Sharp & Son, asking as a matter of housekeeping whether they might confirm certain tonnages. She wrote to a bank. She wrote to the county recorder in Laramie County asking after property transfers in the name of Cole. 3 of them came back with nothing. The 4th one didn't come back at all. "That's the one," she told Nathan at the table. "Nathan, the silence is the answer. 4 letters, 3 replies, 1 nothing. Somebody in Cheyenne got my letter and put it in his pocket and walked it across the street." "You don't know that." "I know that." "Clara, I know it the way I knew about the feed." And Nathan looked at her a moment and then said, "All right," and that was all, and Clara had to put her hand flat on the table, because all right from that man was worth more than 100 speeches from anybody else. They worked like that for 3 weeks. She'd never had it before. Not once in her life, a table, a lamp, another person on the other side of it who didn't tell her to put the pencil down. He couldn't do the arithmetic. He'd never be able to do the arithmetic. But he'd sit there till 2 in the morning and hand her ledgers and say, "Is that the April one or the other April one?" and get up and put wood in the stove without being asked. And once around 1 o'clock, when she'd been stuck on a column for an hour, he said, "Sharp had a brother," and Clara's head came up like a shot. "What? Emmett had a brother in Rawlins, feed and hardware, died in, I want to say 79. "Nathan Cole," Clara said. "How long have you known that?" "My whole life. Why?" And she was already out of the chair, because the second letterhead wasn't Emmett Sharp's old paper at all. It was the brother's. It was a dead man's dead brother's stationery out of a store in Rawlins that had been shut for 7 years, and there was exactly one place in the territory a man could have got a box of it, and that was the estate sale. And estate sales get recorded. She wrote to Rawlins that night. "That's it," she said. "Nathan, if there's a name on that sale." Then he bought the paper, Nathan said slowly, 4 years before he used it. "Which means he didn't fall into this." She was gripping the table. "It's not a man in debt taking a little. He planned it. He planned it, Nathan, in 18 and 82 when you were—" She stopped. Nathan didn't move. "When I was what?" he said. "When you were in that room," Clara said. And Nathan Cole put his hands flat on the table and looked at them for a long moment. "He waited till I couldn't stand up," he said. "Yes." "He came to my mother's funeral," Nathan said, "and he carried a corner, and then he sat down and worked out how long it'd take me to stop opening my own mail." "Yes." "And I gave it to him. He laughed, and there was nothing in it. Clara, I handed it to him. 2 years I didn't read a bill. 2 years I'd take the mail off the table and put it in the drawer and shut the drawer, and he must have thought it was Christmas. Nathan. And every October he'd ride out here and sit in that kitchen and ask me was I eating. Nathan? He stopped. Look at me, Clara said. He looked. You were 24 years old, she said, and you'd just buried your brother off the yard, and there wasn't one living soul in this county who came out here to sit with you. Not one. Not the Reverend. Not Kane. Not any of them. Her voice was shaking. Only him. And you're going to sit at my table and blame a man for being broken while the only person who showed up was robbing him. Nathan couldn't speak. Say it back to me, Clara said. Clara, say it back. I was 24, he said, and there wasn't anybody, Nathan said, and his voice went, and Clara reached across that table and took his hand. The first time she'd ever done it on purpose. The first time either of them had touched the other with intent, and neither of them said one word about it, and he didn't let go. And they sat like that for about a minute and a half. Then he said, Rollins is 9 days by post. And she said, then we've got 9 days of other work. And they went back to it, and both of them were shaking, and neither of them mentioned that either. The town was worse than the letters. She went in for the Thursday post because she'd have gone mad waiting at home, and she went in with her chin up and her hair done, and she got exactly as far as the Mercantile. Mrs. Marsden was at the counter. She turned around and she saw Clara, and Clara watched a woman she'd known for 20 years arrange her face into something soft. Clara, oh honey. Mrs. Marsden, now you sit down. She had her arm. She actually had her arm. You sit right down here and you listen to me because somebody's got to say it kindly, and it may as well be somebody who knew your mother. I'd rather stand. There's no shame in it. The woman's voice dropped and got warmer, and that was the horror of it. It got warmer. That's what I've said. I've said it to everybody. I said that girl was starving, and a rich man opened a door, and I'd like to know which one of us wouldn't have walked through it. Clara's ears were ringing. He's telling you that, she said. Who? Silas Cole is telling you that. Word for word. Mrs. Marsden, you're saying his sentences. And Mrs. Marsden's face changed, just a flicker, just enough, and she said, well, he's a very sympathetic man. And Clara understood in that half-second that it was already over. That it had been over before it started. That Silas hadn't needed a lie because sorry was better than a lie, sorry couldn't be argued with, sorry was a door with no hinge. Mrs. Marsden, she said, may I ask you something? Of course, honey. When my father died, when I came to your house. Clara's voice was very level. You didn't answer the door. I saw the curtain move. The Mercantile went quiet. Now that's not... I stood on your step for 4 minutes, Clara said. I counted. I count things. And I want to ask you honestly because I've wondered about it for 6 months, and I've never been able to work it out. What did you think was going to happen to me? Nobody spoke. Did you think about it at all? Clara said. Or did you just wait for me to go away and then get on with your afternoon? Mrs. Marsden's mouth was open. Because I'd like to be sorry for, Clara said. I would. It sounds restful. But I've noticed the people being sorry for me now are the exact same people who watched me out the window in July, and I can't help thinking the sorry is a good deal cheaper than the coat would have been. And she paid for her sugar and walked out, and behind her a woman said, well, I never. And Clara Cole got 20 yards down the boardwalk before she had to put her hand on a post. Toby Lundgren was there. Of course he was. Mrs. Cole? I'm all right, Toby. You want me to? Toby. She straightened up. Go home and tell your mother something for me. Yes, ma'am. Tell her the man who paid her bill is standing trial in 5 weeks, Clara said, and tell her I said she's under no obligation whatsoever to do a single thing about it. The boy blinked at her. Ma'am, that's a funny message. It's the only kind I've got left, said Clara. She got home at dusk, and Nathan was on the porch step with his hat in his hands, like a man waiting on a doctor. Bess sent a rider, he said. Of course she did. Clara, don't. She went past him. Don't you dare tell me you told me so. I wasn't going to. You were thinking it. Clara. He was up. I was going to say, I'd have paid $100 to see it. She stopped. She turned around. And Nathan Cole was standing there, and she couldn't believe it. He was almost smiling, that terrible one-breath thing he did, and he said, "The sorry's cheaper than the coat." Clara. I've been trying to say that for 8 years, and I couldn't have got it in 100 pages. And Clara Cole burst into tears in her own yard. He didn't touch her. He stood there about a foot away with his hands at his sides like a man holding a live wire, and he said, "Clara," and she said, "Don't." And he said, "Clara," and she said, "Nathan, if you touch me right now, I will fall apart, and I have got 5 weeks of work to do, and I cannot afford it. Do you understand me? I cannot afford it." "All right," he said, "I mean it." "All right." "After," she said. "After the 12th. And Nathan said, "After the 12th," and put his hands in his pockets, and Clara went inside and stood in the kitchen and pressed both palms against her eyes. Rollins answered on the 18th. She got the envelope from Toby at the gate, and she didn't make it to the house. She opened it standing in the road. The estate of Marcus Sharp, deceased, 1879, sale of stock and effects, the county recorder of Carbon County, itemized in a clerk's tidy hand. Lot 11. Office stock. Paper ink ledger sundry. Sold March 1882. Purchaser, S. Cole Cheyenne. Clara sat down in the road. She sat down in the actual road and put the paper in her lap and made a sound like a laugh, and a sob had collided in her throat. And when Nathan came running out of the barn, thinking she'd been thrown, she held it up over her head without turning around. He read it standing over her. March 82, he said. March 82. Isaac died in June of 80. Yes. 21 months, Nathan said. Yes. He waited 21 months and then he bought the paper. Clara looked up at her husband and said, "Nathan, we've got him." And Nathan Cole said, "No." She got up. "What do you mean, no?" "Clara." He handed it back. "What does it prove?" It proves my cousin bought a box of stationery at an estate sale 4 years ago." His voice was flat. "That's all it proves. It doesn't prove he wrote on it. It doesn't prove he mailed it. It doesn't put his hand on one bill." Clara opened her mouth. Then she shut it. Then she said quietly, "Oh, God." "Yeah. Nathan. He'll stand up in that courtroom and say, 'Yes, I bought a lot of office goods at a sale in 82. I've bought at 40 sales. I'm in the supply business.'" That's exactly what he'll say. And then he'll say, "And how did the lady come to be looking at Carbon County estate sales from 4 years ago? What a thorough woman." Nathan didn't answer. "He'll turn it," Clara said. Her hands had gone cold. "He'll turn it the way he turned everything. He'll say, Nathan, he'll say I forged them. He'll say I'm a bookkeeper who came into this house in July and by August had produced $2,000 of theft out of thin air. And isn't it convenient? And where did she learn a dead man's letterhead? Yes. And I found the estate sale, Nathan, I found it, which means I knew about it. Yes."
Clara stood in the road with the paper in her hand and understood that she'd spent 3 weeks building a rope and handing it to a man who'd been tying knots since 1882. "Then what do we have?" she whispered. "Nothing," said Nathan Cole. "We've got a box of letters and nothing." She didn't speak to anybody for 2 days. She sat at that table and went through it, and the arithmetic came out the same every time. And on the third night at about 11 o'clock, she said out loud to the empty kitchen, "He's never touched a cow." Nathan looked up from the stove. "What?" "That's what I said in August. The first thing I ever told you about him, I said whoever's doing this has never touched a cow. He steals arithmetic." She was staring at nothing. "Nathan, he's never been here. Not really. Twice a year for 11 years, and he sits in the kitchen, and he's gone by dark." So he doesn't know the place," Clara said and stood up so fast the chair went over. "Nathan, the April bill, $311 of feed, April of 85. What about it? How much feed did you buy in April of 85? I don't think. And Nathan Cole stood there and with the stove door open and said slowly, none. Clara couldn't breathe. None, he said again. 85 was the wet spring. Grass came in 3 weeks early. Mac near cried he'd never seen anything like it. We didn't buy a pound of feed that whole year we sold Clara. We sold hay to the Hollisters. Clara put both hands over her mouth. Say that again, she said. We sold hay. Nathan Cole, her voice was climbing. There is a bill in that drawer for $311 of feed delivered to this ranch in April of 1885. And you're telling me that in April of 1885, this ranch had so much hay, it sold some to a neighbor. Nathan's face changed. Mac would remember, he said. Mac would swear to it. The Hollisters would remember. The Hollisters have a receipt, Clara said, and she was almost screaming now. They've got a receipt, Nathan, because I've seen their books. I kept their books in 85. I know exactly what they paid and exactly when. And then she stopped. Because there it was, the whole thing all at once, the way a column adds. Nathan, she said, what? I know what's wrong with him. She was shaking. She had to sit down. He's a bookkeeper, Clara said. He's not a rancher and he's not a thief. Not really. He's a bookkeeper, and a bookkeeper who's never stood in a field will steal from a place he's never seen and never once checked the weather. Nathan sat down across from her. Every bill, Clara whispered. Nathan, every single bill. 4 years. He picked April because April's when a ranch buys feed. He picked the amount because it's the right size. He got the letterhead right, and the arithmetic right, and the account right, and he never once looked out a window. How many? I don't know. I'll know by morning. She knew by 4. There were 11 false bills in 4 years. 6 of them were fine, plausible, unremarkable, unprovable. 5 of them were impossible. $311 of feed in a spring the ranch sold hay. $240 in blizzard week of 83, when the road to Cheyenne was shut 9 days, and Mac Rowe had a broken arm from a drift, and there wasn't a wagon moved in the county. $190 in October 84, delivered to a barn that had burned in September and hadn't been rebuilt till spring. She woke Nathan at 4 in the morning by putting the lamp on the barn floor. Nathan, he came up like a shot. What's wrong? The barn. What barn? The West barn. She had the paper in both hands. It burned in September of 84. You told me. You said your father's tack went in it and you couldn't talk about it for a year. That's right. There's a bill, Clara said, for $190 of feed delivered to the West barn in October of 1884. Nathan Cole sat on the edge of a cot in his own barn at 4 in the morning and stared at his wife. Delivered to a barn that wasn't there, he said. Delivered to a hole in the ground, said Clara. And Nathan Cole put his head back and laughed. He laughed like she'd never heard him, like she'd never heard anybody. It went on and on. It turned into something that wasn't laughing halfway through, and then turned back, and he got up and he was crying and laughing at once, and he said, he billed me for a barn that burned. And Clara said, he billed you for a barn that burned. And Nathan said, he billed me for a barn that burned. And then he stopped dead. They looked at each other. Nathan, Clara said, there's a problem. I know. If I stand up in that court and say it, I know. He'll say I made it up. Her voice was flat. I'm the bookkeeper. I'm the one who found it, and I'm the one who can prove it, and I'm the only one who understands it, and that's exactly what he wants. That's his whole case. She's the only one who could have done it. Nathan didn't say anything. Unless, Clara said, unless what? And Clara Cole said very quietly, unless it isn't me who says it. Nathan went still. Clara, Mac saw the barn burn. Mac broke his arm in the blizzard of 83. The Hollisters bought the hay in 85, and they've got the receipt in their own hand in their own house. She was talking fast now. Nathan, I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to say one word about arithmetic. I just have to get 4 people in a room to say what the weather was. The Hollisters won't come. Clara stopped. What? Clara. He said it gently, which was worse. Ed Hollister put in a new stove the month your father died. He wouldn't lend you $40. You think he's going to stand up in front of this whole county and take your side against a man who's been buying his breakfast at Best Tanner's for 5 weeks? Clara sat down on the cot. Then I'll ask him, she said. Clara, I'll ask him. She was staring at the floor. Nathan, I asked 11 houses in July, and every one of them said no, and I swore before God I'd never ask another human being for anything as long as I lived. Her voice cracked wide open. And I'm going to hang to go ask him, because it's not for me. Nathan couldn't speak. It's for you, she said. And then she got up and went out of that barn very fast because she had just heard what she said, and so had he. She rode to the Hollisters on the 2nd of December. Ed Hollister came out on the step and looked at her and didn't ask her in. Clara, Mr. Hollister, if this is about the 12th, it is. Then I'd rather you didn't. And Clara Whitmore Cole stood in a yard in the cold and said, Ed, in '85 you bought 40 ton of hay off Nathan Cole in April. That's all. That's the whole thing. I'm not asking you to say a word about me. I'm asking you to say what you bought. Clara, you wrote it in your own book, she said, in your hand. I know because I taught you to keep it that way. Hollister looked at his boots. Silas Cole came out here Tuesday, he said. Clara's stomach dropped. Did he? Sat right where you're standing. Hollister wouldn't look up. He didn't ask me for a thing, not one thing. He just said he was sorry it had come to this and he hoped folks wouldn't be dragged into it. And then he said, he stopped. Say it. He said he'd hate to see a decent man's name in a courtroom over 40 ton of hay. Clara stood there. That's a threat, she said. That's not how he said it. Ed, that's a threat. He came out here and threatened you in a voice like a hymn. Clara, I've got 400 acres and a note at that bank, Hollister shouted. And then he went red because he'd shouted and because they both knew what he'd just admitted. Clara didn't move. So did my father, she said. Hollister's face went white. That's not fair. No, said Clara, it isn't. And she got on the mare and rode away and got about a mile before she had to stop and put her forehead against the horse's neck and stay there for a while. She told Nathan that night, all of it. He listened to the whole thing without a word, and when she finished, he said one sentence. How much is his note? Clara's head came up. Nathan, how much? Don't, she said. Nathan, don't you dare. You cannot buy a man's testimony. That's the entire thing Silas is accusing you of. I wasn't going to buy it. Then what? I was going to buy the note, Nathan said, and burn it in his yard and never tell him why and never speak to him again as long as I live. Clara stared at him. That's the same thing. It isn't. Nathan Cole, it is exactly the same thing. No, it's not. He said, because he'd never know, and that's the whole. And then he stopped. Because he heard it. Clara watched her husband hear his own sentence, all the way down, the whole architecture of him laid out on the table between them. He'd never know, and that's the whole point. The coat in the box, the coal, the reverend, the boots. Oh, said Nathan Cole. Clara didn't say anything. She let him have it. That's what I do, he said. Yes. That's Clara. That's what I've done my whole, yes. He sat down. I've never once let anybody know I did anything for them, he said slowly. Not one time, not in 15 years. No. Because if they know, they've got to feel something about it. Yes. And then I'd have to be in the room while they did, said Nathan. And Clara said, Nathan, look at me. He looked. On the 12th, she said, you're going to have to stand up in a room full of people who owe you everything and you're going to have to let them know. Nathan Cole put his hands over his face. I can't, he said. I know. Clara, I can't. I'd rather lose the ranch. I know, she said. That's why I'm not going to ask you to. He looked up, and Clara Cole said, I'm going to ask them. She went to town on the 4th. She didn't go to the church, and she didn't go to the mercantile, and she didn't go to a single house of a single person who had ever mattered. She went to Bess Tanner's kitchen, and she said, Bess, I need a room, and I need you to send some boys with some messages, and I need you to not ask me why. Bess Tanner put down a pan. Honey, she said, he's eating his supper in my dining room right now. I know. He's 14 feet away. Bess, Clara said, that's the point. And she sat in that kitchen for 6 hours and they came one at a time, all afternoon and into the dark through the back door, where a man in the dining room couldn't see. Mary Dolan came first. She sat down across from Clara and folded her hands and said, Mrs. Cole, I've got to tell you something before you say a word because it's been sitting on me for 6 weeks. All right. Your boy Amos told me what you said about the coal. Mary Dolan's chin was going. Mrs. Cole, I got told a year ago who paid it. Clara's blood stopped. You what? Coleman got drunk at Christmas, she said. Told my sister. Told her the whole thing, how he'd come in and what he said about ruining him. She was crying now. And I've known for a year, and I never said one word because he didn't want it said, and I thought that was the decent thing, to let him have it. Mrs. Dolan. And then they started talking about him in that church, she said. And I sat there. I sat in that pew and let them because I was keeping his secret. And Clara reached across and took her hand. Mrs. Dolan, she said, would you say it out loud on the 12th? And Mary Dolan said, Mrs. Cole, you'd have to shoot me to stop me. Then Mrs. Lundgren came. Then Doc Pearsall, who sat down and said, I don't know a thing about hay. And Clara said, Doc, I don't want you to talk about hay, and told him what she did want. And the old man went gray and said, Mrs. Cole, that's how do you know that? Because it's in his books, Clara said, and I've read every page 15 years back, and there's a line in 1879 that says, Pearsall forgiven, and I'd like to know what it means. Doc Pearsall put his face in his hands. It means his father did the same thing, he said. Clara sat back like she'd been struck. What? His father, Pearsall said, old Tom Cole. Clara, that's where the boy learned it. Tom Cole carried half this county through the 1874 winter and never let one soul say his name. And when he died, there wasn't 20 people at that grave because nobody knew. He was shaking. I stood there and looked at 20 people, and I thought, we've done a terrible thing to that family, Pearsall finished. We let 2 generations of Coles carry this county, and we never once said thank you because they made it easy not to. Clara sat very still. Doc, she said, on the 12th, I want you to say that. Mrs. Cole, that won't prove a thing about any feed bill. No, Clara said, it won't. Then what good, Doc? Her voice didn't shake. Silas Cole is going to stand up in that room and tell 50 people that Nathan is a man who takes. And I can't argue it because the books say money left this ranch for 4 years, and it did. She leaned in. So I'm not going to argue it. I'm going to make that room understand what kind of man they've had living among them for 15 years and never bothered to look at. And then when Silas says take her, it won't sound like an accusation. It'll sound like a law, and they'll hear it because a lie only sounds like a lie next to the truth. Doc Pearsall looked at her a long moment. Girl, he said, you're not a bookkeeper. I'm exactly a bookkeeper, said Clara. I've just stopped counting money. 12 people came through Bess Tanner's back door that night. Silas Cole ate 2 suppers and a breakfast 14 feet away and never knew a single one of them was there. The 11th she couldn't eat. Nathan found her at the table at 2 in the morning with everything laid out in order and not one thing left to do. Clara, I'm fine. You've been sitting there 4 hours. I'm going over it. You've been over it 11 times. 14, said Clara. And then she put her hands over her face and said, Nathan, if this goes wrong, you lose the ranch, and I lose the name, and Mac loses his pension, and the Dolans lose the only man who ever. Clara. And it'll be because I wrote a letter, because I got proud and sent a letter with my name on it. Nathan crossed the room. He sat down across from her, and he said, Look at me. She looked. I want to say something, he said, and I want to say it tonight because tomorrow it'll be worth nothing. Nathan, if we lose everything tomorrow, Nathan Cole said, I'll have had 4 months at this table with you, and I'd have paid every acre I own for one. Clara's face came apart. Don't, she whispered. Well, he said I did. And Clara put her head down on 11 ledgers and cried, and her husband sat across from her and let her and did not touch her and did not leave. The room was full by 9. Every soul in the county, Kane, Pike, Mrs. Marsden in the second row with her hands folded, Bess Tanner, Pell sweating, Mac Rowe standing at the back with his hat in his hands because he wouldn't sit in front of the family, and Silas Cole at the front in a good coat with a lawyer from Cheyenne beside him, and an expression of such gentle sorrow that Clara wanted to be sick. He spoke for 40 minutes, and he was magnificent. He never raised his voice. He never once said the word liar. He said he'd loved his cousin since they were boys. He said grief does things to a man. He said $2,000 had gone out of that ranch, and the only hand it had ever passed through was Nathan's. He said the marriage had been 3 days after a $900 bank payment, and he was sorry. He was so sorry, but the county could count. Then he said, and I'd ask the court to note that the woman herself has never denied why she came to that door. She asked him, she walked in and asked him, there's no romance in this. There's a ledger. And he sat down. The judge said, Mrs. Cole or Miss Whitmore, the court will hear you. Clara stood up. Her hands were shaking so hard she put them behind her back. Your Honor, she said, I'm not going to talk about the feed bills. The room shifted. Nathan's head came up. I could, Clara said. I've got 11 of them. 5 are impossible. There's a bill for feed delivered in April of '85 when this ranch had so much hay, it sold 40 ton to Ed Hollister, and Ed's got it in his own book, in his own hand. She didn't look at Hollister. There's a bill from Blizzard Week of '83 when nothing moved in this county for 9 days, and there's a bill for $190 of feed delivered in October of '84 to the West Barn. She paused. The West Barn burned in September of '84. Somebody billed this ranch for delivering hay into a hole in the ground. The room made a sound. And I could tell you, Clara said, that a man bought a box of a dead man's letterhead at an estate sale in Rawlins in March of 1882, 21 months after Isaac Cole died, because that's how long it took him to be sure Nathan had stopped opening his own mail. Silas didn't move. But I'm not going to, Clara said, because Mr. Cole will tell you I made all of it up, and he's right that I could have. I'm the only person in this county who understands those books. That's his whole case. And I can't disprove it because you can't prove you didn't invent something. The lawyer from Cheyenne looked at Silas. Silas was watching Clara with an expression that had gone entirely blank. So I'd like to ask a different question, Clara said. Mr. Cole says $2,000 left this ranch and Nathan took it. Your Honor, I'd like to know where it went. Mrs. Cole, because I've read 15 years of that man's books, Clara said, and there's no money in them. There's no house in Cheyenne. There's no whiskey. There's no cards. There's a man who eats standing up over a sink and hasn't bought himself a coat since 1880. Her voice was rising. Nathan Cole has been stealing from himself for 4 years, and he's got nothing to show for it. Silence. So where'd it go? Clara said. I'll tell you where the rest of his money went. Mrs. Dolan. Mary Dolan stood up. She stood up so fast her chair went over. He paid our coal, she said, the whole winter of '84. Every lump. And he told the coal man if he ever said his name, he'd ruin him, and I found out anyway, and I've kept my mouth shut for a year because he wanted it, and I'm done keeping it shut. Mrs. Dolan, the lawyer started. Sit down, said Mary Dolan. I ain't finished. He put my boy on that ranch 3 weeks ago, and I never asked him. Mrs. Lundgren stood up. He paid my husband's bill when Carl died, she said. Told me not to tell nobody. I never did. I'm telling now. Then Reverend Pike stood up. The whole room turned. He paid this church's arrears, Pike said, and his voice broke. $240, 3 years ago. He told the board if his name was ever said, he'd never set foot in the building again. He looked at his own wife. And I stood on those steps in July, and I married that man to that woman like I was doing him a favor. Mrs. Pike put her face in her hands. Doc Pearsall got up. His father did the same, the old man said. Tom Cole carried half of you through '74 and never let one of you say it. And when we buried him, there was 20 people at the grave because nobody knew. He was shaking. That's not a family that takes. That's a family that's been giving to you people for 2 generations with its mouth shut, and you've let it because it was free. And then Mac Rowe walked up the middle of that room with his hat in his hands. Mr. Rowe, the judge said. I got one thing, said Mac. You've not been called. Your Honor, I'm 61 years old and I ain't said 50 words in public in my life, so you'll let me say 12. He turned around. He looked at Silas. I seen that barn burn. September '84. I hauled the tack out myself and I burned both hands doing it. He held them up. There wasn't a barn there in October. There wasn't nothing there in October but ash and a hole. Nobody breathed. So somebody wrote a bill for hay he put in a hole, said Mac Rowe. And it wasn't Nate, because Nate was out on the North Line that whole month, and I was with him. Silas Cole stood up. Your Honor, this is theater. And Ed Hollister said from the third row, I bought 40 ton off him in April of 85. The room came apart. Hollister was on his feet, and his face was scarlet, and his wife had both hands on his arm, and he shook her off. I've got it in my book, he said. In my hand. April 85, 40 ton, off Nathan Cole, and I paid $12 a ton, and I was glad to get it. He was breathing hard. And a man came to my yard 9 days ago and told me he'd hate to see a decent man's name in a courtroom, and I have not slept since. Ed, Silas said, don't you say my name. The judge hit the desk 4 times before it stopped. And in all of it, Nathan Cole sat with both hands flat on the table in front of him and his head down and his shoulders going because he was in a room full of people who knew, and there was nowhere to walk out to. The judge said, Mr. Silas Cole, stand up. Silas stood. Did you buy office stock at the Marcus Sharp estate sale in Rawlins in March of 1882? And there it was the half second. Clara watched it. She'd watched it once before in her own kitchen over a word about feed. I've bought at many sales, Silas said. That's not what I asked you. Your Honor, I'm in the supply. Mr. Cole, said the judge, I have the Carbon County record in my hand. It has your name on it. I'm asking you to say yes. Silence. Yes, said Silas Cole, and the room went so quiet Clara could hear her own blood. The judge dismissed the petition in 11 minutes and referred the whole matter to the district attorney, and the last Clara Cole ever saw of Silas was his back going out a door. But that wasn't the end of it, because the judge, before he let them go, looked down at Clara over his spectacles and said, Mrs. Cole, for the record, and then I'll close it. The petition alleged this marriage was a fraud. I've heard a great deal about a man's money. I've heard nothing about that. Clara stood up, and she couldn't speak. 4 months of arithmetic, and she couldn't get one word out, and she felt the whole room waiting, and Nathan's head came up beside her, and she looked at him and thought with a kind of terror, he thinks I can't. He thinks I'm going to stand here and not be able to, and he'll forgive me for it, and he'll spend the rest of his life saying it was fair. Your Honor, Clara said. I went to his door in July and I asked him to marry me for money. That's true, I've never denied it, and I never will. Nathan closed his eyes. And he said no, Clara said. The room stirred. Nobody knows that. Not one person in this county knows that. Nathan Cole told me no and put me out, and I got to the door before he asked me how much. Her voice was shaking now, and she let it. He said no because he wouldn't take a woman who'd been driven to him. He'd rather have lost me than won me that way, and he had 8 years of reasons, and he threw every one of them away in about 4 seconds because he'd rather I hated him than owed him. She turned around. She looked at the whole room. And there's a coat in a box in that house, she said. 6 years of dust on the lid, and the string still tied. He bought it in December of 84, the day I gave mine away, in front of the Mercantile, and half of you were on that street, and he carried it to my father's porch and stood there and couldn't knock and took it home again because he knew if I took it, I'd have to be grateful, and he could not stand the thought of me being grateful at him. Somebody in the back was crying. Your Honor asked, was this a fraud? Clara turned back. It was. I'll say it plain. I stood at that fork in the road for a quarter of an hour on the 19th of July, and I lied to myself. I told myself I was going for the money because if it was the money, I could survive him turning me down. Nathan Cole's whole body went rigid. That's the fraud in this marriage, said Clara. It's mine. I've been running it since July, and I've been running it on me. Mrs. Cole. Nathan. She turned and she looked straight at her husband in front of 50 people and did not lower her voice 1 inch. You said the letters prove you loved me, and they don't prove I love you. He couldn't look at her and look at me, Clara said. Nathan Cole, you look at me. He looked. I love you, she said. The room made a sound like a wave. I have loved you since about the 2nd of August, Clara said, when a 61-year-old man told me you'd been out in the rain till 2 in the morning, fixing a fence I mentioned once, and I stood in that yard and could not work out why I was crying. Her face was streaming and her voice was absolutely steady. And I've been afraid of it for 4 months, and I'm not afraid of it now, and I'm saying it in front of a judge in a courtroom, and Delmer, Kane, and God, because you told me once you'd never got to decide anything, you just stood there and found out. Nathan Cole was on his feet without knowing he'd stood. So decide, Clara said, for once in your life. Here it is out loud in front of everybody. where you can't pretend you didn't hear it, and I can't pretend I didn't say it. There's no box, and there's no door, and there's nothing to lock. Silence. Say it, she said. And Nathan Cole, who had said it 400 times to an empty room, who had not been able to get it out on the floor of his brother's bedroom with the storm coming down, stood in a courtroom in front of every soul who'd ever whispered about him and said, "I've loved you since the 6th of June, 1878. Bess Tanner made a noise like she'd been shot. "You were 17, he said, and you washed a stain out of a tablecloth for an hour and folded it under and set a dish on it, and then made the girl who spilled it laugh, and I went home and wrote it down, and I have not had one single day since that I didn't." And Clara Cole crossed 4 feet of courtroom floor and put her arms around her husband's neck. Nathan Cole caught her like a man catching something falling off a roof. And the room, that county, that pack of people who'd counted her at $900 on the church steps in July stood up. The judge let it go about a minute. Then he said, "The petition is dismissed. Mr. and Mrs. Cole, get out of my courtroom." And there was a sound in that building like a roof coming off. They didn't talk on the way home. There wasn't a thing left to say, and they both knew it, and Nathan drove, and Clara sat beside him with her hand through his arm, and about 4 miles out, he stopped the wagon in the middle of the road for no reason at all, and neither of them said anything, and after a while he started it up again. But she'd felt him shaking. The first thing he did in that house was walk down the hall and take the door off its hinges. He didn't say anything about it. He got a screwdriver and he took the pins out, and he carried the door out to the barn, and Clara stood in the hallway and watched him do it and didn't say a word because there wasn't one. That night she came down at midnight and found him in Isaac's room with the box open on the bed. "Nathan, I'm not going to burn them." "I know. I thought about it." He had one in his hand. "Then I thought that's the same thing, isn't it? That's just another way of not saying it." Clara sat down beside him. "What are you doing then?" And Nathan Cole said, "I'm putting a date on the last one." He wrote it while she watched. December 12th, 1886. She said it first. Then he closed the box and put it on the shelf beside a store box with 6 years of dust on the lid, and he said, "That's the end of that." And Clara said, "Nathan, that coat still fits." And he laughed, a real one, a whole one, the first one in the history of the man, and she wore it out of that room and never took it off that winter. The Valley talked, of course. It talked for 30 years. But it talked different after the 12th. Delmer Kane never said her name again, and Mrs. Marsden crossed the street twice and then stopped crossing it. And the following spring, Ed Hollister rode out with 40 ton of hay he wouldn't take $1 for, and Nathan wouldn't take it free. And the two of them argued about it in the yard for an hour, like men who'd finally got something to argue about. Mac Rowe got his pension in writing. Clara wrote it herself and made Nathan sign it twice. Amos Dolan ran the West Barn by 1890, the new one built on the hole a man once built for hay. Silas Cole was indicted in March and never set foot in the county again. And the house filled up. That was the part nobody could explain afterward. Not even the two of them. The cups came out of the cupboard, and there was a coat thrown down on a chair, and a cup left half drunk, and clutter, and noise, and eventually the sound of children who were told from the time they could listen that their father had loved their mother for 8 years before he ever said hello. Clara kept her ledger. She kept it her whole life. She never crossed out the title. It still said, "Things that don't add" on the front in a young woman's careful hand, and every line under it was about him. And on the last page, dated 51 years after a birthday party in 1878, in handwriting gone shaky, as her father-in-law's, it added. Years later, people in that valley still told it wrong. They said a poor woman married a rich cowboy to survive. They said it at every wedding like a warning or a joke. But those two knew the truth, and it was simpler than the story and harder than the story both. She went to his door to survive, and he opened it because he had been waiting 8 years, and neither one of them ever spent another day of their lives being alone.